Alrighty, hello and welcome to another episode, man. How's it going? I'm glad to be here, and I'm very excited for today's conversation, which I'm sure will benefit a lot of you. But it's something which is a, a thought that occurs to you when something really weird happens, right? Like this talk about, of course, now the whole thing about COVID misinformation and the vaccine mandate and anti-vaccine and mask stuff. Of course, you must have heard a lot about it. And of course, it's everywhere. It's everyone arguing. And even someone like Joe Rogan, buddy of mine who was inspired after me to do a podcast, was in the limelight. I don't know how. It's something to do with his listeners. Guys, you got to get a hint. If Mr. Joe's followers can do that for him, you guys got to do at least even 1% of what they've done. I think would be appreciated if you get my drift. So anyway, the podcast that was modeled after. Nah, just okay. Anyway, so he got into a lot of shit for the stuff that his guests ended up talking about and conversations he had about the vaccine and whatnot. But I mean, does it take a pandemic to help us open our eyes about the medical and the healthcare industry and whatnot? And I don't know. I don't want to go down this pretending that I'm an expert. But what it is for me is that I've done something, to kind of correct my way of how I look at medicines, right? I'm not, okay, first of all, let me just put out this disclaimer of sorts. I'm not anti-medicine. I'm not anti-pills. I'm not anti-doctors. I don't think that we should sort of have a blanket approach to anything with complete negativity or positivity. I think questioning is good. I think having a little bit of doubt is good. But at the same time, man, I'm telling you, sitting after a bender with a throbbing headache, or sitting after a bender with food after bad foods, you're in a bender because of whatnot has gone into your stomach. I'm telling you, whatever you might take, whether it's drips because you're dehydrated, or whether it's Crocin or Crocin pain or Dolo cold or Dolo 650, whatever the medicine is, or you had a stomach bug and antibiotics, whatever it may be. It's remarkable how medicines can really get you back on your feet. Now I'm talking about the extreme, where medicines are just simply, you're just given medicines just because it's there. And the other extreme, or the dark side of the healthcare industry, which is to keep people sick. And I'm talking about chronic illness. I'm talking about stuff that can cause issues, by issues that cause issues. It's a never-ending cycle, and keeping you medicated for the rest of your life, which then causes more complications. And I'm talking about issues that can be corrected through choices that you make. Because I know people who have been on medicines for years, 50 years, 40, 50, 60 years. And I never thought about it because it was almost bred into me, or it was almost, that was the message, right? If you're unwell, take medicines. If you're sick, take medicines. If you have an unhealthy level in your body, whether it's sugar, whether it's cholesterol, take a medicine, sort it out, sort your shit out. And I'm coming kind of from that point of view, going, whoa, it almost feels like I've taken off the blindfold. No, not literally, fuckers. But I mean, I've kind of been asking questions about this, right? Because I don't suddenly like being dependent on a medicine. Of course, you might say people drink. Of course, that is a good thing. And I'm joking. But it's a choice you make, right? And I want to have a choice with what I put into my body. Now, of course, if I choose to put shit, hey, that's my choice. But I've really been kind of understanding why do we just sort of blindly take medicines, and why do doctors blindly, or rather, why do doctors hook you onto medicines, right? So is it a good thing or a bad thing? As I said, I'm not an expert, but it's very interesting how there's an entire generation of people, be it adults, older people, who are suffering from the consequences of these medicines that they've been taking and they've been given. And they're pretty fucked at the end of it, right? They're sitting there, have all these issues, and you don't know what medicines cause what. Like, yeah, okay, cool. You take a course of antibiotics for 5 days. Oh yeah, great. That itch on your testicles is gone. But you take it the next 5 days again because you have, whatever you might have. You might have a viral fever, or you might, which is, of course, I don't know why you take antibiotics for a viral fever. But anyway, I don't know if that makes sense. But you take it because you have a stomach bug, or then you take it for another thing, or you take it for, whoever knows what people are doing. The next thing you know, you've taken like 6 courses of antibiotics in 6 months, and I don't think that's good for you. And I was reading somewhere, of course, and this has to come up, like in The Guardian, that a lot of people died over the course of 2021, 2022. I'm keeping the thoughts very positive on this episode, by the way. Just pleasant things like death. But it needs to be spoken about. And I will not stand for misinformation. But 2021, 22, a lot of people died because of resistance to antibiotics. There's a word to this. Did you know that? Yeah, you didn't, did you? So it is a real thing. It's not just happening here on the SoapyRao show. It's happening in the world. Of course, it starts here. Not the misinformation, not the disease. I'm saying the thoughts, the change begins here. But I want to talk about this. I want to talk about why medicines are important when required. Of course, you're sitting there and you're bleeding out. I don't think you should be like, oh no, I should have made choices which are better for myself when I was a teenager. Be realistic, you fucker. You get hit by a car. Don't be like, oh, I should have done more Pilates and I should have jogged more. Maybe I would have been more agile. That way I could have jumped out of the car's way. No. I'm not even talking about that. If you're going to look at it in such high contrast and such black and white points of view, then you're probably on the wrong podcast. You should probably get on Arnab Goswami's show, where everything is just shouted at. Like if it's AIDS, he shouts at it. If it's COVID, he coaxes it. If it's political parties, he gets on his knees and does things to it. Who knows? Who am I to judge? Anyhow, but was that the visual you had as well in your head about Arnab Goswami on his knees and a certain person in power? Anyway, so the thing is, my guest on today's episode is a person who, and there's another aspect to this person, but I'll tell you. So he's someone who basically took his life into his own hands, and he had quite a lot of medical scares because he was living the corporate dream, the dream of jet setting, having, expense accounts, traveling around the world, turning around companies, having, a lot of the money shtick, which a lot of people were bought into, including us. So we all bought into it. And he had it all. And he lived in the US, lived the American dream, came back to India, and the American dream followed him. It became the American Indian dream, or the Indian American dream, depending on what context, or depending on if you're politically correct, and America comes before the India comes before the America. Who knows? It's a world of opportunities. But he had it all. And one fine day, he felt like crap. His body said, nah, and the doctor said, and something else said, and they said, and someone said, take a bunch of medicines for all these problems. And he said, nah, fuck this, quote unquote. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to look at what I've learned in my corporate life, which he's a marketing consultant. And sorry, is he a marketing consultant? No, he's a consultant. Sorry. Raman, if you're listening to this, you're not a marketing consultant. You're a consultant. So he said, I'm going to approach this problem I have in my life, because he's an individual who turns around companies which are going through some issues. He said, why should I not turn around my own life? In his own words, you'll hear it very soon. So he took it upon himself to understand what the body and all of it, the mechanics, the chemistry, the genetics. So he studied it like a company, like an industry. He went through it all and said, I'm going to revamp and get my life back on track without taking medication. So that's a lot about what we talk about today. And he's a fount of knowledge when it comes to various illnesses, lifestyle, disease. And he's not a self-medicator. He talks about things that you can do which are healthy, like food, lifestyle, diet, environment, and mental health. All these things that are contributors. Of course, there are a lot more. That's why I talk to him and I don't give you a summary of the guest. That would be a great podcast, right? Guys, I had a great guest. I'm not going to play that for you. But here's a summary in my own words. How pissed off would you be? Yeah. Or maybe I should give you a summary and say, for the whole conversation, subscribe and pay a certain subscription fee. Wouldn't that be a devious, bastardized move on my part? Maybe I'll do it soon. Should I do it? I don't know. Let me know. You guys are not staying in touch with me. I'm very upset. But no, you can rest assured. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll keep you guys thinking. Anyhow, jokes aside, or even possibilities aside, Raman Manglorkar is a fantastic human being who's really, really knowledgeable about the various developments in anti-aging, in diabetes care, in all the things that are surrounding these issues, and a lot more. Of course, I'm just giving you a little bit of what you can expect, and how, most importantly, just like how he did and how he's continuing to help people after helping himself with his new startup where he's trying to reverse aging for 100,000 people. I think if that's not, I think it's around 100,000 people, 200,000 people maybe, and 5 years each, so 1 million years he wants to bring back to people, and anti-aging tips, the medications, the procedures out there, but more importantly, just practices that you can do to get started. I think it's very nicely put. He's of course got a lot of information on it, and all you got to do is sit back and relax, and you can hear it from a person who's actually a success in the corporate industry, and not someone who's a person who's an artist like me, who's just like, no, the 9 to 5, the corporate life, if you're just kind of putting your life and your health on hold, is not going to be good for you in the pursuit of money and success and that entire sort of bullshit that is fed to you. You can actually hear how that isn't good for you from a person who's been there, done that, succeeded at that, and said, hey, you know what, my life, my health is more important, so I'm going to take care of my body, my breath, my soul, and my mind. So you can stay tuned rather, and listen to Mr. Raman Mangalorkar and I chat about life, about health, about the mind, the body, and a whole lot more. And as always, I appreciate you for tuning in every week and for passing it around, sharing it, and telling everyone in the world it's the best podcast, and how Joe Rogan has modeled his podcast after mine. You don't have to say that. That's all. I'm just joking. So thank you, and enjoy the conversation. And until next time, goodbye. God bless. Cheers. Mr. Raman Manglorkar, welcome to the SoapyRao show. How are you?
Thank you very much. Great. Good to be here. Thanks a lot.
Lovely. So, well, we got onto an introductory call a few days back, and that seemed to give me so much information. So I'm really excited to share what you have to say to a lot of the people on the podcast, all of them, because I think we all can benefit from someone who's been through a journey like yours, because you were a management consultant, you were successful in your field, you've done it all. You've done the jet-setting life, living out of suitcases, living out of expense accounts. You've told me all of this. And one fine day, you changed it all and you focused on something which we all take for granted and say we'll focus when we retire on our health. But you said, no, enough of this. So what was that moment that made you realize that you need to change your life around?
Yeah, so, I had a typical, sort of, let's say, ambitious career. After graduating from college, as I mentioned to you earlier, I went on to a consulting career. I lived in Chicago, actually, pretty much through that duration. Mm-hmm. And then I moved back to India and continued to live a sort of, let's say, a stressful life with lots of travel and lots of responsibilities and so on and so forth. And then, so I ran a company, did a turnaround at that company. And then once that turnaround was finished, I actually had the first time in my life where I sat back and I looked in the mirror and I reflected on my life and I said, what the hell, what are we doing all this for, right? Mm-hmm. I guess you could call it a midlife crisis if you want to, but maybe that's what it was. But fundamentally look back and, started to confront your own mortality in some ways. Your parents are getting older and you sort of look in the mirror and you say, okay, where's all this headed to, right?
Yeah.
And so, so that was the, let's say, catalyst that got me going in terms of inquiry into my own health and my own journey. Mm-hmm. And then from there onwards, it's just been a sort of a journey of learning and experimentation and, growth, if you will.
I want to talk about that. That, of course, is the focus of today's conversation. But before we get there, I want to understand, and maybe from your experience and from all the work and the people you've helped since the time you started focusing on health and understanding how to de-stress your life and understanding the various indicators that help for a healthier way of living. Why do you think, from all the examples that you've come across and maybe your own example, why are we celebrating this kind of lifestyle, which is the so-called corporate lifestyle, right? Where you are ambitious, you're running after these goals, after money being a primary motivator. And it's not one story, right? It's repeated across the world. And of course, there are the examples like you who realize that, hey, what's going on? Why this? Why am I neglecting my primary thing in my life, which is my health, to pursue this so-called dream of success and celebrate it as a corporate role model? And it seems to be repeated across the world. And we, as a developing economy, or maybe a country which has an economy which is expanding, we're being fed this, I wouldn't know if lie is the right word, but an economy which is so big is being told that this is the way forward, when it's clearly leading to a lot of health and mental health issues. So what is it? Like, I mean, why are we consuming this narrative so easily?
Yeah, I think a part of it stems from the fact that, we started off as a poor nation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you could sort of bring that down at the family level, or you could take it up at the nation level.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are poor, you are envious of everything that you see around you. You want to, progress. You want to progress your life. You want to help other people around you, and put them on a better path in terms of the regular luxuries, if you will, of life.
Mm-hmm.
And you see the only way of liberating yourself from sort of, let's say, the drudgery or the monotony, or whatever you want to say, call it, is by going out and trying to prove yourself and trying to do well in life and earning a good income and building a name for yourself. And to some extent, our identity gets wrapped up in the successes that we have, right?
Yeah.
So as we get more and more successful, our identity gets wrapped up in that, and then then you're on this continuous, let's say, treadmill where you're running just to stand where you are. And there's so much of peer pressure around you. There's so much of pressure around you to perform and do well and improve your even also help people around you, and so on and so forth, right? So we never actually sit back and reflect, and we just sort of running,
Yeah.
And I think part of that, Sandeep, is a definition of the word success, right? So early in life, our parents have fed us, our schools have fed us, our education system has fed us that the definition of success is being whatever, however you define it. And most often it is to do with something monetary, to do with power, to do with prestige, to do with fame,
Very material attachments. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Material attachments. And therefore you're just sort of running on that. You've not had a time to reflect and think about it. And the more success you get in terms of accomplishing some of those smaller goals, the more ingrained you get into the system. Right. And that's a self-perpetuating thing. And then, then you realize that you're just running and you're in the midst of a rat race. And at the end of the day, you have to realize that, to be in a rat race, you are a rat at the end of the day.
Yeah. The hole gets stronger, right? As you rise up the ladder of success. Yeah,
Exactly.
No, it's amazing that, many times, when I'll give you context to why I'm going to bring this up, because when we hear these stories of people giving it up all for a better way, if you want to say a mindful way of living, a healthier way of living, many times, it's people who are like, what, I really have decided that I want to do this because I enjoy it. And so, of course, there are the people who have sort of hit peak, like maybe a celebrity going, what, I can't do the business anymore. It's got to me. I'm going to retire to an ashram and meditate, right? Or it's someone who's already decided, what, the pandemic was a wake-up call to say, what am I doing all this for? But many times, successful people taking this call when they have a big flow of money coming in and saying, what, enough of this. My health is important. I'm not saying it's unheard of, but it is on the rarer side. So after being through this, you've seen success. Your last project was successful. You turned around a company and then sold it for a profit, of course. So on that trot, you're typically, as you said, society's message is, hey, don't stop now. Your things are good. You should make more when, all those things, make hay while the sun shines, and all these things that we're fed, as you said. So what was that for you after, I don't know how old you were at that point, but waking up one day saying, wait a minute, this is scary. Like, what was that one indicator in your health, or the collection of indications in your health that made you so sort of take such a drastic decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of multiple things, right?
Mm-hmm.
These things don't happen in isolation in of itself.
Yeah.
I think a couple of pointers for me in my life were that, my father had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw him struggle through the last years of Alzheimer's. And I don't know if you're familiar with people with Alzheimer's, but it is a devastating disease,
It strips you away of everything that you've built up in your life, right? As a person, as a human being. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really strips you away from everything and makes you, really almost inhuman, I mean, you've lost all sense of everything around you, right? And you're completely dependent on somebody else to take care of you in every way possible.
Yeah.
Including, your food and everything else, right? So I saw him struggle through that to the end of his life, and and I reflected on his life, and he was a successful guy. He was sort of gregarious and outgoing and interacted with people and everything, and his whole identity had been completely radically transformed and changed, right? So then, at that stage, you confront your own mortality. And then I saw myself headed exactly in that same direction. May not be in Alzheimer's, maybe in Alzheimer's, because apparently, there's a hereditary component to it. But,
Okay.
Heading down that sort of metabolic journey of ill health. And so I reflected on that and I said, listen, where are we all going with all of this stuff, right? So,
Yeah.
What can we do about it? And, I had a chance to think about that. And that was actually the catalyst that got me going. In addition to that, I think I mentioned to you earlier that, I went and got a test done, and I saw all my blood reports. And the doctor said, hey, listen, you've got, elevated blood sugar, you've got elevated blood pressure, your cholesterol levels are out the chart, your liver is fried, your kidneys are in bad shape, your
the whole buffet.
Uric acid is high, blah, blah, this, that, and the other. And then the doctor said, listen, for your sugar, this is the medicine, for your pressure, this is the medicine, for your cholesterol, this is the medicine, for your triglycerides, this is it, and so on and so forth, the whole litany of pills.
Yeah.
And so then I reflected and I said, what the hell is all this all about, at the end of the day? And so for me, that was the coming together of my own journey and deciding that I needed to do something about it.
Which, I think we all have faced that, right? At some point, facing the doctor and he or she is like, yeah, you need to get on meds. And, it's so easy to just say, okay, you know what, this is my lot. I admit that I have been putting my body through abuse, and I mean, it might not even be severe abuse, but it's so, again, like just like how the success story and material attachment and reward system is ingrained in our education system, the family narrative, the social narrative, just like that, the medical narrative is so ingrained, right? If you're not well, take medicines. If you have high cholesterol, get on statins. If you're on a certain, if you have sugar, if you have diabetes, you get on this. It's just so programmed in us that we have to go to a doctor if we're not well. They have to make us better by giving us medicines. So when you are faced with a list of medicines and list of levels that are high, and you're told that this is really, really high levels, your natural instinct is to freak out, right? So when you're given all these medicines and your natural instinct is to freak out because of the way you've been conditioned, how did you fight that instinct and say, no, wait a second, I'm going to understand this and going to, get to the bottom of this because it's my body, it's my health, and I want to have a solution which is non-medicine based?
Yeah. So, I mean, you have to actually think about where the person giving you advice is coming from. I've always felt that you have to understand their context. Because anybody that tells you something is in the context of their own learnings and their own experiences. So if you look at a doctor, I'm completely convinced that, the entire medical profession is actually in the sick care business. They're not in the healthcare business. Right?
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Essentially what happens is the definition of health today in the world is the absence of illness, which I think is the wrong definition. right?
Mhm.
And therefore, when you go to a doctor, the guy tests whether it passes that definition. Is there an illness? And if there is an illness, then I need to treat you. And therefore they commence a treatment, and their entire, let's say, tool sets that the doctors have,
Yeah.
is only based on pharmaceutical mechanisms to treat you, because that's what they've studied, through the course of their entire life, that they've actually, been studying, and also the experiences that they have, right? So, so the old saying is that if you go to a surgeon, the guy's going to cut you up. If you go to a doctor is going to prescribe, or he or she is going to prescribe a medical aid. I mean, if you go to a barber, including me, who's bald, they're going to find a way to cut my hair, despite me having no hair, right?
Yeah.
So, so you have to understand where they're coming from. So once you understand where they're coming from, and they're, to some extent also tied by the fact that there are certain norms, medical norms, there's certain standards of care that they have to adhere to. And if they don't do that, then their license could be at risk, right?
In certain countries with the insurance is more
in
about
certain countries, and also generally, I mean, if you have let's say high cholesterol or something, then you're a cardiologist, and your goal in life, if you're a cardiologist, is to make sure that patient has zero risk, or at least least amount of risk from a cardiovascular standpoint. And therefore, unfortunately, the body is a system, but they are looking at optimizing only the cardiovascular system, right? And I keep
so that medicine for the cardiovascular thing can have side effects, which is again, as you said, it's so specific that their area of focus is so specific that once it's out of their realm, it's not their concern. Is that what you're saying?
And so they, in fact, I keep making this joke that from a cardiovascular surgeon or a cardiovascular cardio person standpoint, if you're dead and your heart is still beating, the guy is celebrating, right? Because their job is to keep your heart beating. I mean, that's it, right? And and so they're ready to compromise anything else so that the least amount of risk, even if it's causes more harm and more risk to the rest of your body, the least amount of risk, is there from a cardiovascular standpoint, and that's what they are optimizing. So my point is that each person comes from their own understanding, their own biases, their own learnings, their own, goals, their own incentives, right? And a cardiovascular person's incentive is a certain way, surgeon's incentive may be something else. And if you are able to understand that and understand the context, then you're able to understand where they're coming from, and they all are coming from a good place. They all are well-meaning. It's not that they're not well-meaning. They all are very well-meaning, but it may not be in the best interest of you holistically as a human being, in my opinion.
Right. So, okay. So I think that's important to understand. I don't think most doctors, are out to get you, right? I don't think that's their intention.
They're not. In fact, they're trying to help you.
Yeah. But, okay, so you're sitting here now, you've got all these levels, you're a management consultant, and you're very upfront about saying this. You're not medically trained. You're not a medical professional. You're not a doctor. You're not a researcher. You're not a medical scientist. So you're sitting here and you say, okay, I don't like this approach of popping pills to get my health back, or get my, I don't know if that's the right way of saying my health back. I don't know where it went, but to get my parameters back on track, to get my life and most importantly, my health in my own, the control over my health in my own hands. So where does someone start? Where a management consultant turned healthcare professional, or I don't know if that's the right word, but a person who's in many ways got an overarching sense of or understanding of the healthcare protocols and how to make your life healthy and take sort of the reins in your own hands. So where do you start, and how did you go about it?
Yeah. So, that's a good question. But fundamentally, I as you mentioned, I come from a consulting background, and what we do in consulting is we try to help companies improve the health of the company.
Yeah. Okay.
So companies doing badly, it needs to be turned around, or companies doing well, but there's certain areas, maybe it's a pricing issue, it's a strategy issue, it's a supply chain issue, whatever it is, right? And they've got a set of problems. We typically go in and we understand what those problems are. There's a whole structured process in terms of understanding the facts, and then generating findings and generating conclusions, and then developing recommendations and so on and so forth, right? So that was my sort of background and my own ability to do research, which I came from. And so I said, listen, why don't I apply this whole systematic process to my own body? Yeah. Is there something I can actually look at and evaluate exactly in those mechanisms for my own body to understand where this is all coming from, and then to see if something can be done about it, right? And that's what got me started. So I said, listen, let me first go out and collect a whole bunch of facts in terms of what these parameters mean, what consequences do they have on somebody's lifespan, what do they have interactions with each other, are they common in terms of their manifestation, and therefore that's what I embarked upon. So I started, I met a few doctors, I got some advice from them, I read a whole bunch of books, I listened to a whole bunch of podcasts like yours. I met a whole bunch of nutritionists and so on and so forth. And that got me started on the journey to understand where this is all about, and got me going in terms of drawing some conclusions from my learnings.
Yeah, the nice thing from talking to you on our call before this and even now is that, there's so much laser focus, like a person, as you said, when they're looking at cardiology, will be so deeply entrenched in that space, and as a person who's doing gene therapy, will be so in that particular gene that sometimes what happens, the world outside is kind of disconnected. But I think someone, from what you are saying with your approach, is that while you might not be medically trained, which of course we'll get to, in how people experience that information, how do they process it when you tell them, I'll help you, we'll get to that in a bit. But I think what's amazing is when you put in so much work, and clearly, just by example, as you said, you've turned your life around, and I want to get to those levels and those initial experiences. But you are able to sort of have this overarching set of sort of experiences. You have knowledge across the board, and you're able to, while you don't have the prefix doctor to your name, you're giving so much information which connects the dots and doesn't just focus on, say, okay, you have a dislocated knee, let's just fix that, or you have like a hip issue. But you're able to say, okay, I've got all these things that I'm looking at when I look at your chart or when I look at your blood work, and okay, go to your doctor, no problem. They might recommend medicines, but here's what I can tell from your experience. I mean, from your reports, from the thing, that this is the larger picture, which so many times is not given to a patient, or not even a patient, to an individual. Why do we call them patients, right? So when you did the initial research, you put together this case for yourself, what were the sort of revelations, if you want to call it, which were different from what the doctor told you?
Yeah. So I think, it's important for us to first define what your goals are, because if you're not able to define your goals, then you don't know what you're working towards. Right. So for me, I sat back and I reflected on the situation, and I said, let me get down to the basics. What are really my goals? What am I trying to accomplish over here? And I came to the conclusion, to some extent influenced by my father's illness, to some extent influenced by my own sort of, ill health, if you will, if you want to call it that, term it that. But I sat back and I said, okay, what are my goals? And I defined my goals across two parameters, right? Yeah. I said, I want to increase my lifespan, which is how long you live. But more important than lifespan, I want to increase my health span, which is how well you live, right? Okay. There's no point in being 95 years old, 100 years old, sitting in diapers with dementia in a wheelchair, right? Yeah. At the same time, there's no point, popping off in your 30s or 40s, from a heart attack. Six-pack, with a six-pack, right? Exactly, right? So you want to balance both those, lifespan as well as health span. And for me personally, I came to the conclusion, that I wanted to focus more effort on health span, because I said, listen, however long one lives, one needs to make sure that you are healthy right till the end, whenever that is. Right? No point obsessing about how long you live, but let's try to be as healthy as you can. And what does that mean, right? So that means that you should be able to, even in your old age, in fact, our definition of old age itself is transforming to some extent. In the old days, a 30-year-old, 10,000 years ago, a 30-year-old guy was probably considered an old person, right? Because
Yeah.
your life in your tribe, you've accomplished everything from a birth standpoint, right? You've reproduced, you've gotten the next generation going, and now you're not required anymore. In fact, you're just a burden on society. Right.
Or worst case, you're just going for breakfast and like a tiger eats you, which is very
exactly. Right.
We don't have those issues now.
Yeah, and over the years, the definition of age has dramatically changed as we've gotten more technology, as we've gotten lifespan which has increased, and so on and so forth. Right. So in today's environment, 80-year-old is considered quote unquote as an old person because their physical state has dramatically reduced as opposed to when they were in their 40s or their 50s, right? And therefore,
sorry, I lost that word.
I said their physical state. Their physical
state, right. Okay.
Yeah, their physical state has deteriorated relative to how old they were when they were in their 30s or their 40s. And therefore, they have this perception and feeling that, listen, I don't want to live this horrible life if I'm going to be living like this. And, and it's a deteriorating life from here on or out, right? So I said, listen, I want to really focus on health span. And that's what I got started with. So lifespan as well as health span. And then I said, health span and lifespan in the current context is something in my own control, right? I can work on it. And I started doing a bunch of work related to that. And let the technology catch up, let other things happen. But this is where we currently stand, right? So that's what got me started.
So we live, this is 2022. Of course, the pandemic was a big shock to everyone. Of course, I think the background of the world sort of landscape has been better than most decades. I mean, of course, we're sitting through a war right now, but other than that, I'm saying specifically like for countries like India and China, there is a stronger middle class, more money to be spent, a lot more temptations to spend that money on. At the same time, a lot more access, right? So when you put these things against the landscape of, maybe climate issues, war, geopolitical issues, what is going on with the environment that we live in? I'm not talking just of the global warming aspect or climate crisis, as many of them are calling it, but people are living longer. As you said, there's a healthcare system which is able to make you live longer by taking away cardiovascular disease or giving you medicines for diabetes. But how much of this is creating a population that's dependent on medication and also on a certain lifestyle that's being prescribed? And how easy or difficult is it to take your health into your own hands?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think, let me try to answer your last question first, which is how easy or difficult is it to take your health in your own hands? I think, the challenge really is people feel that they don't have adequate information, right? And they are scared of taking health in their own hands to a large extent. The reality is we've never had as much information on our fingertips as we have today. Any time in the past. I mean, today everything is in your fingertips, and a lot of people try to say that there's way too much information. But if you actually look at get into the real sort of information. I mean, if you're going to go into the real research reports and getting into the primary sources of that information, that is much more accessible today than it ever was in the history of mankind, I think.
Otherwise you go to the archives of some university library, get an access code, get this, get that. But now you can actually do it through the same tool that's spreading misinformation, right?
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
And you can actually get to those research reports, Sandeep, and draw your own conclusions. In the past, we actually needed to listen to journalists. I mean, there used to be a research report which got released, and the headline said, I don't know, cholesterol causes heart disease, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever, something like that, or let's some provocative statement.
Yeah.
Right. And you actually didn't. I mean, and they actually interpreted the results of that research report on your behalf, and they shared whatever their conclusions were. And today you can actually go to that same research report, delve deep into it, look at the conclusions, and in fact, even to some extent, have a difference of opinion with the researchers which have done that analysis. right? They might have actually drawn a different conclusion from the data than you yourself would have drawn, basis their understanding of what the data was showing versus what you think the data is showing, right? And
Okay, so you're talking about the analysis, but just before we move on, I've heard a lot of times people talking about not the analysis, but just the study that is conducted, right? In its very raw collection data phase that has already got a bias. Is that true? Or is that like, you hear about things that, the USDA or the whoever's thing will sponsor a study or will give a certain laboratory certain funding to say, okay, come out with, we want this study to have a bias towards this particular result. So not even in the analysis stage or the journalist or the people interpreting it, but from the way it's conducted itself, it's already set up for a certain outcome. Is that true?
Absolutely,
Okay.
right? So there's all. I mean, you can prove anything you want to. You can disprove anything you want to. I mean, honestly speaking, there's adequate evidence on this side of the table, and there's adequate evidence on that side of the table as well, right? But a lot of the research is actually conducted by pharmaceutical companies, by anyone that has an interest in the outcome, right? Especially a financial interest in the outcome. When you have a large financial interest in the outcome, then you have an incentive to have a large study because it's almost considered like an investment, right? And if you can prove or disprove whatever you're trying to prove or disprove, with legitimate academicians that are stamping their names on that particular research paper, then there's lots of money to be made by you, right? So the statin industry is one huge example of that, right? It's this massive industry. And, and they've put out a whole bunch of research papers. And to a large extent, we don't know what research papers that have failed the tests that have not been published, right?
Which have conveniently been hidden,
which has conveniently been, ignored or hidden. And in fact, there was a recent situation where somebody went into the archives of a basement, and pulled out the Minnesota coronary experiment and, pulled out a whole bunch of reports which had actually inconvenient conclusions drawn, which were just hidden for 30 years, 40 years, right?
Sounds a bit like that Epstein stuff going on, right?
It's true, right? So, I mean, but think of it, right? If you are, got such a large incentive and you're trying to do some research to prove something and it doesn't get proven, then you're not going to even release the fact that it didn't get proven. You just sort of throw it away in the garbage and you move on to the next thing.
I mean, it's just such a glaring what do you call that? Oversight, if you even want to call it that. But one side you're saying alcohol, tobacco is bad for you. It's a heavily taxed industry. Kids know it's bad. Every ad that's out is bad. Now it's not even being advertised. While you're sitting watching those ads, you're belting like, a Coca-Cola or, I'm saying in a cinema hall or wherever you're watching it. Like, why is something which, of course, I want you to talk more about this as we go forward. But it's just such hypocrisy, right? Like people one side are saying, tobacco is bad. Of course it's bad. But why aren't you informing people like how you have on the pack of cigarettes that this is injurious to health or it will cause diseases? I think the verdict's out that sugar does as much damage to the human body, right?
Yeah. But, so this is the thing, right? So always the proof, has very, very large or very high standards before the government gets involved, before the agencies get involved, before there's taxation, before there's all these
the policy aspect, right?
Before the policy aspects can come in. And offsetting that, there's a whole bunch of lobbying groups and companies which are incentivized to make sure that some of that doesn't happen. So it's a very, very, very slow wheel that needs to be turned. And in the case of tobacco, which was glaring, obviously, but even that took so many years, before they actually intervened and started to make certain statements and move forward. So it's a complicated process. There are a bunch of incentives and a bunch of countervailing forces and so on and so forth. But therefore, that's why, Sandeep, it's the responsibility of the individual. Then reflect upon, everything that is out there and make a concerted judgment about what they do and what they don't do. And therefore, to do that, I think all of us have to be, to some extent, at least a little bit informed about some of the key variables in terms of health. And so that they can actually embark upon, I mean, I keep making this point, the first thing that somebody should do is become the CEO of your own body, right?
Yeah.
Because nobody else is going to be the CEO of your own body, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, there are conflicting agendas, there are conflicting, people out there in terms of propagating their own points of view. And it's up to us to sieve and sift through all of that and come up with our own thinking and our own conclusions in terms of what one does and what one doesn't.
Yeah, it's very true that we kind of, in all aspects, tend to sort of go with either the herd or more importantly, I think we go with stuff that's coming down. And I think this is something with all aspects, from popular culture to food, to technology, to automobiles, and even with healthcare, we kind of seem to look to the West, and whether it's Europe or it's America with research or with medical interventions. And we kind of, with everything, like a few years, maybe decades, or maybe now it's quicker, we kind of start adopting the practices that they do. And for like, okay, let's look at this country that we live in and we call home, right? It's, I don't know, maybe 1.8 billion or maybe 2, who knows, right? Maybe it's crossed 4 billion, who knows, right? Could be hidden, the numbers. But there is a huge population that doesn't have access to healthcare, doesn't have access to clean water, doesn't have access to healthy food. Now, in the middle of that, we have a population that's being exposed to a lot more influences, to a lot more money, to a lot more temptations. Now, that also keeps a huge opportunity, or creates an opportunity for, well, I don't know if to sort of exploit, but it seems like it's really sort of like, green pastures for the medical industry to say, okay, now we have this thing, because, okay, let me ask you this question, why is it so common that from America to, say, India, there is a lot of people being fed this narrative, being fed this food, which is keeping a population sick? So in the scale of India, it'll be times 20 compared to America, right? So what is going on there? I mean, I don't know if this is a question or it's just a thought.
No, I think, the reality, I think it's a good observation. I think the reality is people that are well-fed, non-questioning, that are, happy, quote unquote, living day to day, and relatively unhealthy are the most lucrative customers, right?
So they're not on the verge of popping off. No, like, not to be morbid,
exactly.
But they're not starving. So they're in the middle ground. Is that what you're saying?
And they're the most lucrative. I mean, they say that something like 90% of medical expenses are in the last 1 month or last 15 days of somebody's life, right? In a lot of these places. Anyway, the point is that I think it's not that there's a conspiracy, although it may look like there's a conspiracy, but I don't think there's a conspiracy. It's just an alignment of incentives and an alignment of interests, right? Yeah. In which you have big pharma, and you have big Medicare, and you have big insurance, and you have big agriculture, and you have big retail, and you have big food in terms of processed food industries, and you have all these restaurant chains and fast food chains and so on and so forth. Yeah. And all of them are sort of incentivized to make sure that somebody that is, quote unquote, over-consuming, overusing, living life, quote unquote, full size, spending money on insurance, spending money on all those consumer products, and being unhealthy and being sort of relatively unwell. Yeah. And therefore, on this rat race and just running. That is the most lucrative sort of customer. And that's where this quote unquote industrial complex makes, the most revenue and the most profits. Right. Yeah. And I don't think they're sitting back and sort of collaborating in terms of this, but all the incentives are to ensure that the insurance guy or the healthcare provider or the medical doctor or the hospital is getting the patient to do procedures, to do interventions, which may not necessarily be the best thing to do, but is the most lucrative thing for them to do in the short term.
And what's so strange, when you mentioned this whole thing of the industrial complex and all these various industries that are I mean, it looks like they're in cohorts, right? But what's strange is that the person working at the mid-level or the entry level, they are I mean, they're getting as screwed by the company that they work for as someone else, right? It's maybe the 1% on the organization who's taking these decisions, to make sure that the incentive being company profits or whatever it may be, but the 90% of the company are still consuming the same food, or they're going to the doctor, they're going to get the same medicine. So it's very strange that humans do it to other humans, and without knowing that they themselves are, victims of their own works at some level,
I remember I used to go to Philip Morris in the old days, we went to do a project there, and they used to have in their conference rooms, there were ashtrays and cigarettes and everything, it was freely available for people to smoke while you were there in their offices. So
I mean, that's changed. Yeah.
I'm sure that's changed. I hope that's changed now.
I mean, the whole thing is sort of, as you said, generational, right? Then this whole explosion of not explosion literally, but this whole e-cigarettes, and then kids picking them up and getting like flavored, these liquids, and then again, but I mean, anyway, that's another sort of rabbit hole, which I don't think we can skip that for today. But okay, so let's take your intention now is you've turned around your health, and that's brilliant news, and you've done it without medication. So what is, okay, just for people who don't know you personally and the transformation that you've been through, can you just maybe give an idea of what the past 5 years have been like with your lifestyle, with your food habits, and just let's get that conversation started, and then maybe we can talk about your approach to this entire health, getting your health back on track, helping others, but maybe use your story as an example to start this off.
Yeah, so I'll quickly tell you sort of, in terms of some of those parameters, and then we can sort of embark upon what I did exactly, the specifics of what I did, and my thinking around that, and the conclusion that I drew, right? So for me specifically, as I told you, all those parameters that were out of sync, right? The blood glucose levels, the cholesterol levels, and so on and so forth, the uric acid, and all the other stuff, the parameters that were out of sync. I went back and did a whole bunch of research, and I looked through all of that stuff. I understood what was driving a lot of those, those numbers. And based on that, I, did a whole bunch of research and came to certain conclusions. And from those conclusions, I came upon certain recommendations, which I embarked upon on myself. And, after that, I basically reduced and reversed all those conditions.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So my blood sugars came back to normal. My pressure was fine. My liver was okay. My uric acids were fine, normal, and so on and so forth. And then I embarked upon the next phase of the journey, which was...
Sorry, so how long did this take? This
took about 8 months. So it's not...
So within a year.
It's something that can easily be done very quickly. In fact, a lot of those things you can do it in a couple of months to 3 months, right? It's the body is so resilient. It's just that we come in the way of our own bodies, and the body heals. It's fantastic. It's phenomenal.
So sorry, you were in your 40s when you did this?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you weren't like early 30s, so people are like, oh no, it can be done even at your middle age.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be done when you're 80 years old as well, right?
Right.
So that's what happened, and and then I lost a whole bunch of weight, and then you feel good about yourself. You're sleeping better. Your stress levels are better. You are, and then there's a whole set of sort of secondary benefits that one generates out of being healthy, right? And maybe I can share with you my framework for that as well.
I think that would be great for people listening as well.
Yeah. So that was the journey, and I reversed all those conditions that I told you, and I didn't actually use any medication to even get me started on any of those things. And then the next phase of that was, I said, listen, it's okay to be normal, quote unquote, but normal is not adequate, right? I want to be optimal.
Right.
There's no point being normal, because I don't know if you're familiar with the way they calculate normal. Is they look at the entire population, and then they say, okay, let's take a number like, I don't know, blood sugar, right? They say the mean, which is the average blood sugar of this entire population, is X. And then they calculate something called standard deviation, which is a measure of variation. and this is two standard deviations on the right of that mean and two standard of the left of that mean will be 99.7% of the population, and therefore that is considered as normal, right?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, right. And that's how they actually come up with these parameters in terms of normal. So if you have a declining population, so this is actually very valid. Like for instance, in the case of testosterone, systematically testosterone levels in the entire world have been going lower and lower and lower. And so what the medical community has been doing is just revising what is considered normal. Right?
So the parameters are being shifted as opposed to the levels going back up.
Exactly, right? So your grandfather's normal is different from our normal, which will probably be different from our grandson's and grandson's normal as well. Yeah. Right. So
why I mean, just on the testosterone thing, because it's a big conversation, but also you hear people popping supplements and people taking steroids, and but what is this? Okay, what is a byproduct of a dropping testosterone level?
A byproduct, I mean, there's a whole bunch of metabolic activities that testosterone does. The most obvious thing that it does is it, ensures that muscle mass is maintained and body fat is kept lower relative to the rest of your body. And muscle mass is a very, very important, let's say, a parameter to have, especially as you age, right? Because you want to protect your muscle as you age, because that's the ultimate, let's say, currency which ensures that health span is maintained, because then you can walk, you can run, you can jump, you can carry
keeps your framework strong.
Yeah, exactly, right? So that's the most apparent one. And then of course the other there's a whole bunch of other sort of secondary benefits to testosterone levels, including your libido, including sort of the feeling of being a man and wanting to achieve and accomplish and obtain and grow and so on and so forth, right? So it's got a whole bunch of things, but as you continue to redefine what is normal, one needs to reflect back and say, listen, normal is not enough. I want to be optimal, right?
For yourself and your body.
For myself, right? And I want to be at optimal levels, and optimal levels does not mean optimal for an 80-year-old man. Optimal means optimal for when I am at the optimal age from a health standpoint as a human being, right? And so therefore I sat back and I redefined what my ranges need to be, right? In terms of blood sugar, in terms of, all those different parameters and a whole host of others. And I said, listen, I don't want to just be normal. I want to be optimal. And so I've been on this journey to try to get all my parameters into optimal levels, not just normal levels. And
so how do you determine what's optimal for, say, at that point you were determining for you? So is there like a bunch of studies you look at or different reports?
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of studies depending upon the parameter you're looking at. So let's say you look at blood sugars. There's a whole bunch of, the thing with blood sugar is that it's not, diabetes is not an on-off switch, right? So it's not a binomial equation, right? So it's not like either one day you have diabetes and next day you don't have it. It's a continuum. So as your blood sugars start inching higher and higher and higher, you're getting closer and closer to having diabetes. And then, we as the medical community, the medical community has defined diabetes as somebody whose blood sugar is, let's say, about 125, or fasting blood sugar is about 125. But at 125, it doesn't mean that you're quote unquote, healthy, right? And at 125, it doesn't mean quote unquote you're unhealthy, right? It's a continuum.
Some people are like, I'm 124, I'm fine. It doesn't mean that.
Exactly. In fact, that's what your doctor will tell you. A lot of times you go to the doctor and, the doctor will say, oh, you're 116, 117. Don't worry, we'll deal with it next year. Come back next year, just manage it and come back next year. And then next year you come back and you're 126 and the guy is like, okay, here's metformin for you. Get started. Right?
Yeah, or there's another thing which is just the day before you go for your blood work, you don't touch alcohol, don't touch sweets, don't touch anything.
Exactly. There you go.
No, you had mentioned, this is sort of relevant because when I was giving you an example of my, so I'm predisposed genetically to have a cholesterol issue, right? Because I mean, I'm not the fittest, but in the sense I'm not someone who looks like will have, and this is something you mentioned, right? Indians don't look like they have certain disorders and certain levels which are higher, because you might look at say an American or a European who might be big sized, but compared to an Indian, they might look unhealthy, but the Indian has much more, startling levels in their body of maybe diabetes, or sugar levels are higher. And similarly for me, like I'm not someone who looks like I'm at risk of cardiovascular disorder, but if you look at my triglycerides, which I told you, which was, you said, startlingly high, it's 262. So automatically, the doctors, I get on statins. And I was like, of course, the doctor said, now I have to follow it. And you were like, no, that's not the approach. And could you just tell my listeners what you told me that about these things? I don't know if it's out of order when we're talking about this, but about the whole fat cells and those two, the two kinds of things, the hyperplasia and the other thing, and how size is deceiving, and how being skinny is not always being healthy.
Yeah. You're right. So there's a concept called TOFI, which is thin on the outside and fat on the inside. Right?
Okay.
And so therefore, and typically South Indians especially are genetically more prone to metabolic illness from a blood sugar dysregulation standpoint.
Okay.
Because we, South Indians tend to have this phenotype of TOFI. So you see a lot of South Indians who are skinny guys. And women, but have raging blood sugar levels, right, out of control. And then you'll find obese people in the West, in also in Scandinavia or any of these Nordic countries, and their blood sugar levels are perfectly fine. They're metabolically very in tune. So it does not mean that obesity is the only driver, right? One needs to understand what is behind all of that stuff, right? Now, in terms of that specific issue around sort of the fat cells and how they grow and and how they get stored and what happens, I think it's a little bit of a deeper conversation. We can do it in a little later.
Okay, done.
I think once you've established a little bit more context in terms of what I call as let me lay out a framework for you first. And then we can get a little bit more deeper into that.
I think that's important to give a sense of what are the parameters. So food, lifestyle, health, exercising. So all these things, I think we'll
right.
So we'll probably continue where we were.
Yeah. So let me just try to lay out a framework for you, Sandeep, in terms of my own journey and where I got started and what got me there, right? So as I told you, my goal was to increase my lifespan and my health span. And my focus really was on the health span. How do I get healthier, and how do I ensure that I stay healthy? And stay healthy in the context of optimal levels, not just normal levels, quote unquote, right? And so I reflected on that, and I said, listen, what does one need to do? And I came to the conclusion that one needs to ensure that they avoid the 4, let's say, big drivers of death.
Okay.
And ill health, but really of death, right? So I think the figure is like close to 80% of us will die from these 4 diseases.
Okay.
If you're not a smoker, but 80% of us will die from these 4 diseases. And if you are above a certain age, and and you don't count things like suicide and some of those other
accidents, of course,
accidents and suicide and so forth, right? So the 4 diseases are cardiovascular disease, cerebrovascular disease, which is stroke and associated illnesses, neurodegenerative disease, which is Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, and cancer. So these are the big 4: cardiovascular disease, cerebrovascular disease,
So the cerebral vascular is different from cardio, because you usually associate stroke as a cardio, right?
Well, they're related, but they're related. But they're a little bit different. A stroke actually, is a little bit different than a heart attack, if you will, right?
Okay.
So and the last, as I said, was cancer. Right? So many of us will succumb to these 4 illnesses. So I said, okay, fine. If one is going to, these are the real risk variables out there, and I've got all markers which are getting me headed in those directions. So what the hell do I need to do? And I came to the conclusion that one needs to understand what are the precursors to these 4 illnesses or these 4 diseases. And I came to the conclusion that there are fundamentally 4 key precursors to these illnesses.
Right.
And the 4 precursors, Sandeep, are elevated blood sugars. The second is elevated blood pressure. The third is truncal obesity, right? So, fat in the abdominal area.
Trunk and above. Okay.
Yeah, especially visceral fat. So, which is the fat in the below the subcutaneous fat, which is the
around your organs, right?
Yeah, around your organs, exactly, in your abdominal cavity. And then the last is little nuanced, but some aspect of high triglycerides and low HDL levels, which is high density lipoprotein levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these are the 4 primary variables that one needs to look at, right?
Okay.
So I said, okay, these are the 4 precursors one needs to look at. So I said, okay, now what the hell does one do if you have these precursors or if you don't have these precursors, right? What does that mean from a lifestyle span standpoint and from a health span standpoint, right?
Yeah.
And I came to the conclusion that there's good news and bad news. The bad news is that if you have these precursors, then the probability of you getting those illnesses that I spoke about earlier, the cardiovascular disease and so on and so forth, is exponentially higher, right? It's not linear function. It's not a little bit higher, but it's much, much higher. It's 2x, 3x higher, 5x, 10x higher, right?
Right.
If you have some of these precursors, right? So that's the bad news. The good news is that they can all be reversed.
Yeah. Lovely. Okay. So not even halted, but reversed.
Reversed.
So from being in threat or being in danger of this, you can actually go out of that category completely.
Exactly. Right. Now, they cannot be reversed using modern medicine. Yeah. Now, because what modern medicine does is just suppresses the symptoms of these conditions, of these precursors, right? So if you have elevated blood sugar, you just take a pill and then boom, your blood sugar comes down, right?
But it's not addressing it at the source. So why do you have high blood sugar?
It's like if you're driving a car and the airbag light comes on, you take a small little piece of tape and you cover that airbag light, and you continue to drive the car. Fine, the airbag light is not on, it's not showing on your dashboard, but the damn airbag is not working inside,
I like that. Right? It's like masking tape, which is medicine are masking tape.
Exactly. That's what they are.
Right.
Because they've not reversed the underlying condition of elevated blood sugar. They've just suppressed the symptom by giving you, in fact, giving you insulin or giving you metformin or something that is stimulating insulin or getting the body to get rid of the blood sugar, which is circulating in your system. Without actually addressing the root cause of why the blood sugar is high in your system in the first place.
So can you say almost it's short-circuiting your body's understanding and saying, okay, this is a quick fix? So, sometimes if there's a leak in a pipe, instead of replacing the pipe, you're just like, I'll just put a little sealant.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it's the belief that, everything's cool temporarily, but it could lead to massive structural flaws or massive issues in the system later on.
Absolutely, because you've not reverse the underlying condition. You only suppress the symptom.
Got it.
So long as you just suppress the symptom, then the underlying condition is continuing to be around. And the consequences of that underlying condition that is continuing to be around is that you just get progressively worse and worse. In fact, that's what happens, right? So you have elevated blood sugars, you go to a diabetologist, the diabetologist gives you gives you metformin, and then you continue to take metformin, and then slowly, the dose of, next year you go back again and the dose gets higher and the dose gets higher. And then, over a period of time, the doctor says, okay, now you need to start taking insulin injections, and you start with the insulin injections, and then, the amount of insulin that you need to keep injecting yourself goes higher and higher and higher and higher. And that's what you're doing, So
then, most likely you've developed side effects which have their own manifestation, right? Yeah,
exactly. By then, this elevated blood sugars and the continued spikes of blood glucose levels as you're trying to medicate yourself are causing all kinds of second degree, challenges, microvascular damage, damage to your kidneys, damage to your eyes, so on and so forth. And then, over a period of time, your condition continues to deteriorate. And then, then the diabetologist just puts you in touch with a nephrologist and says, okay, now go talk to the kidney doctor or go to talk to the eye doctor. Or
it's like, friends at a bar sitting, I have this other friend, you should meet him.
Exactly. And if you don't meet him right now, you're going to meet him after 5 years. So you might as well get connected with him right now.
Exactly. Right? He can buy you around.
Yeah, he can buy you around right now. Right? I don't think that they intend to do this. A lot of times if you go to a diabetologist, they'll say, listen, our hands are also tied, because if you tell the patient that they need to do, interventions from a diet standpoint and so on and so forth, they just ignore us and
They go to another
about
doctor, right?
Yeah, exactly. They just go about doing their stuff, and then their condition continues to deteriorate. And so it's better that we give them this medicine. So therefore, at least we are treating the symptoms. And therefore we are, stopping the pipe from leaking, at least in the interim. And like you said, and then you come back next year and the pipe leak is a little bit bigger, so we'll give you a bigger tape to mask it. Right?
Yeah. No, and that's the thing we need to importantly highlight, is that it's both. It's not that the doctor's out to get you, and it's not that they want to tell you to just take these medicines, and people think, oh, it's a pharmaceutical conspiracy. But people don't want, who will go to a doctor more than 3 times and they don't give you anything and say, no, you need to quit smoking, right? Even I would be like, no, give me something to make me feel better, right? At least, because I'm not going to quit smoking. If that's the mindset, then the doctor's, as you said, a little bit in a corner, right?
Yeah, exactly, right. So I said, okay, now, I said, okay, so these are the precursors, which, as I said earlier, was elevated blood sugar, elevated blood pressure, truncal obesity, and high triglycerides / low HDL levels, right?
Yeah.
So I said, okay, now these conditions can be reversed, but they cannot be reversed using modern medicine, because modern medicines only suppress the symptoms. Now, what the hell do I do to reverse the underlying condition of the manifestation of these precursors, right? And so I started, understanding that, and I did a bunch of research, and I came to the conclusion that there are 5 vectors, if you will, or 5 reasons on why these precursors manifest, right? Yeah. So I'll just go over them very quickly with you, and then we can sort of take it from there, right?
Absolutely.
So the 5 precursors, or the 5 vectors, or the 5 key variables in terms of what causes those precursors to manifest are, the first is your genetics. Yeah. But there's good news and bad news as far as your genes go. The bad news, to some extent, is you have what you have.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about it, right? For some people, that's actually good news. They might be, blessed with some great genes, So you'll always hear this example of somebody that says, oh, my tata or my grandfather, used to smoke 6 cigarettes or 10 cigarettes. He used to drink, 3 pegs of whiskey every night, and he lived to be 95 years old, right? And he was hale and hearty right till the end. Yeah,
good
great.
Good.
More power to him, right? Or more power to her. But that doesn't mean that you need to do that, right?
Yeah.
So some people have certain genes, and they're blessed with those genes. And some people have, other genes, right? But genes are clearly one variable. The good news is, as I said, the bad news is that you have what you have. The good news is that I firmly believe that genes only predisposes you to a condition. It does not predetermine that condition will manifest.
Right. Okay.
So what the genes do is it says, listen, if all the similar circumstances, let's say your mother has diabetes and your father has diabetes, and you live your life exactly like your mother and your father, you eat the same food.
You're kind of feeding that gene, saying, come on, you can turn on now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And then exactly that condition will manifest. But if you choose not to do anything about it, then the genes need not manifest, and the genes need not express themselves, and the genes need not, ensure that you get the diabetes, right?
Is it fair to say, sorry, while you're on that thought, that the responsibility of the genes is not to kill you, it's in fact to enhance your life? So no gene is outrightly trying to prevent you from living a full life. Is that right to say?
Yeah. So each gene that we are blessed with, is a particular, it's there for a particular reason. Right?
Yeah.
In the context of certain environment that we lived in, that gene might have been phenomenally beneficial to us, and that's why we've selected for that gene, and we've killed off other people, or rather, through the evolution of man, we've ensured, or humans, we've ensured that the people that were not selected for that gene were actually sort of dead or did not survive, and the ones that selected for that gene survived, right? Because in that context of that environment, that gene was highly, highly, highly useful, whatever that environment was, right? Yep. So, for instance, in the case of of this blood sugar issue, you will find that this is one of the things that we have these refrigerators in our own body. We're able to convert sugar into fat. We're able to store that fat, and that was a very, very valuable trait that human beings had, which was the ability to store fat, right? And utilize it when we didn't have access to food. So that was fantastic. However, today in today's environment, we have so much abundance of food. We are eating 3 times a day. In fact, more like 6 times a day.
Yeah,
You know,
snacking. Yeah.
and the levels of of carbohydrates and sugars and so on and so forth that we're consuming now is certainly unprecedented relative to our ancestors. And therefore, that same gene which enabled you to convert that to fat and store it is now not working in your favor, right? And similarly, you have a whole bunch of this. For instance, there's one gene called ApoE4. Right, and if you have two copies of the ApoE4, then your probability of getting Alzheimer's is like significantly high. It's more like 50%.
Oh wow! Okay.
Get Alzheimer's as not having ApoE4, right? And now that ApoE4 was actually a very beneficial genetic morphism that enabled people to actually address a whole bunch of inflammation challenges. Probably when they were living in the in the bush, right?
Yeah.
And it was very valuable to a certain set of humans at that time, but now it's unfortunately causing other challenges which we did not anticipate.
Maybe those people didn't live long enough for the Alzheimer's to kick in.
Right? So they did not live long enough for that manifestation to showcase itself. And therefore, it never did, right? Yeah. So therefore, the point I'm trying to make is, I mean, I try to use the analogy of a gun, right?
Yeah.
The genes are like a bullet in your gun, right?
Yeah.
They load the gun, but the gun is kept on the table, and you choose to pick up the gun and pull the trigger. And if you choose not to pick up the gun and pull the trigger, then that gene will not manifest for you, right?
Right.
It will not showcase itself. But if you do exactly the same things as your parents did, as your whatever, and live the same life and embark on the same sort of stressors and sleep issues and so on and so forth, obviously then you're predisposed to it, and that probability is high that gene will manifest.
Yeah. Right.
So this is the whole point about what's called as epigenetics, which is what sits on top of the gene, right? Which is largely driven by the environment that you live in and the context that you live in that environment, which then ensures the manifestation or the expression of that genetic, expression, which then translates into a phenotype in terms of how we live our lives and so on. Right?
Okay.
So anyway, so the first point was the genes. So as I said, my cascade was I wanted to increase health span and lifespan. To improve my health span and lifespan, I need to avoid those 4 diseases. To avoid those 4 diseases, I need to ensure that those 4 precursors don't manifest in me. And now I'm exploring what causes these precursors to manifest, of which I've identified the genes as the first precursor. The first, the factor that manifests or enables the manifestation of those precursors.
Right.
The second one is your environment, which is, the environment that you live in. Yeah. Now, you and I can pack our bags and go live in the Himalayas and, live in a very, very comfortable, cool environment which we have, no pollution and no toxicity at all.
Yeah.
But let's assume that, we are living in an environment which is not inundated with toxins. Now, of course, it's changing as we go along.
I think the Himalayas is probably more polluted than Bangalore right now with all the climbers and the feces and all that.
That's also probably true,
Yeah.
So, but my point is that, the environment is a key variable. So if you're exposed to a whole bunch of chemicals and so on and so forth, then the probability of you getting a cancer or something like that is much higher, right?
Okay.
So one needs to ensure that you're not living in a highly polluted environment. You're not subjected to a whole bunch of toxins, metal toxicity, and so on and so forth through the course of your life. And therefore these conditions will not manifest, right?
Sorry, I know before you move on, I don't want to harp that sort of delay you on each point for too long. But how do you control the air you breathe or the water you drink? Because many of us might have the option of moving to a beachfront and have clean air, or the hills or wherever. But for those who don't, can you put something in your water to clean it? I'm just asking from a very maybe
absolutely.
on address it later.
No, absolutely, right. So I think the first point is to understand what the risk is, right? So if you live in a house which has got a whole bunch of lead paint and a whole bunch of mold and it's all over the place, then you have to have the ability to move out of that place, right?
Yeah.
If you continue to do that, then that's
like asbestos sheets, those kind of very glaring things.
Exactly, right?
Okay, you're not talking
or if you work in an occupation where you're exposed to certain chemicals on an ongoing basis and you don't take the necessary precautions through the course of your career, in terms of your exposure to those chemicals, then certainly that's going to manifest in a whole set of challenges as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? So those are the big ones. But your specific questions on air and water, certainly, one can, work on the air that one breathes and work on the water. Now, in terms of working on the air that one breathes, one of the easy things that one can do is there's a whole bunch of indoor plants that you can put into your house, which make sure that the air is, it's all relative context, right? Is actually slightly better off than not having that. There's air filters that one can use. One can ensure that if you have an air conditioner, you continue to keep it clean. You ensure mold doesn't come into your air conditioners because there's dampness in the air conditioner and it's leaking mold, especially in the winter months that you're not using the air conditioner. And so there are a few things one can do like that, right? So similarly with water, one can ensure that you have access to at least some sort of an RO system.
Boiling,
then you're using then you're also energizing that water with some minerals, because unfortunately a lot of the RO systems take out a lot of the minerals from the water. So you're putting back some minerals in the water. But yes, these are some of the things that one can do as far as air and water. Now, some of them you can control 100%, some of them you can control to some extent, and some of them you can't control. Right? The ones that you can't control, and if you believe that they are causing a huge amount of toxic burden to you, and you cannot control it, then you have to make a choice. Is this something I want to continue to do and take the risk, or do I want to move out of this house and go somewhere else? Right?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I just wanted to understand. So as people were on this point, just like sometimes you feel helpless, right? Like, oh my God, what can I do? I live in the heart of Delhi during the season when they burn all those crops, and now I'm sitting with the particles per in whatever it's called, the PPI, whatever that level is at 800, and like, what do? I don't have the money to relocate to say Vanuatu or wherever it's clean. So just for those people, like maybe there are a couple of home hacks, as many people might call it, to do this. And this is helpful. I think maybe something as simple as just make sure you're not sitting under an asbestos sheet. That's in your control. Or maybe you're not, chewing on, plastic for snacks or whatever it may be, right? So just wanted to stop on that point to help people.
And on that point, Sandeep, there's this concept called the allostatic load. Right. Which is that the body has the ability to manage certain stress. Right? And once I think of it like a cup.
Yeah.
And you can put on additional amounts of stressors into that little cup.
Yeah.
But when the cup overflows, then you're not able to manage it, and then it manifests in all kinds of second tier challenges that the body is facing. But so long as that cup is within its control, it can do that. Right.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to say is, like, let's say you are subjected to a whole bunch of toxins from whatever set of reasons. Let's say you live in Delhi, like you said. Then a girl can make sure she doesn't use lipstick which is cheap quality, right? Use the high quality lipstick, or use the face makeup in which it doesn't have additional toxin burdens that she is being subjected to, right? Or the shampoo that you use, the toothpaste that you use, the soap that you use, the creams that you're putting on your body, and so on and so forth, right? So there's, like I said, if you are in a very difficult situation, then you need to balance that out with other things that are in your control. But if you're not, then you can use those lipsticks, and you can use those makeups, and you can use those whatever you need to use. The
like when you're sitting in that smog or getting that bus which is spewing out smoke into your face, try not to light a cigarette, right? Might help.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point. Right?
Yeah.
Don't add to the load that your body needs to manage. And so on and so forth. Anyway, so that's the second point, which
the environment.
The third point is actually a very important one, but we won't delve too much into it today, which actually maybe we will, but which is mindset, right? I'm firmly believe that your mindset is very important. And if you have a can-do attitude, you have an approach to life which is about the future, which is about good things, which is about optimism, which is about gratitude, that itself is the commencement or the start of a journey, which will start to tell all your cells in your body that, listen, things are good. Things are good. There's a positivity around us, and it starts to manifest very quickly. It might sound a bit woo-woo, but it's actually true. There's this book.
The message you tell yourself, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a book by Bruce Lipton called The Biology of Belief, and I
Mm.
strongly recommend that. Where he talks about how there's been so many cases of patients which have terminal illnesses who've at least enhanced or improved their probability of curing themselves or reversing those situations just by believing, right? In
Mm.
fact, that this is what faith healers do actually, Sandeep, right? So
Mm.
you go to somebody that you really have a very, very strong belief in, right? Whether it's religious belief, or a lot of these God men or God women or whoever it is. And while their approach might not be necessarily correct, but or maybe it is correct,
Mm.
but the effect is actually to many people real, right?
Yeah.
There's the whole concept of the placebo, in
Yeah.
which the placebo in many instances is stronger or equal to or as strong as the intervention in of itself, right?
Mm. It's quite
So
amazing. Yeah.
yeah, so like the faith healer says, listen, go and do this and you'll be fine. And
Mm.
you really believe it, and you believe in it, and your body believes it, and then boom, guess what happens? You're fine.
Yeah. It's
So
amazing how you hear these stories, and faith is
yeah,
so powerful. Yeah.
yeah. And so the concept of the placebo is very, very crucial, very important, right? So your
Okay.
mindset is crucial and important. So if you have, like I said, if you have a negative approach, and then you just keep taking medicines and so on and so forth, you're not going to get better, right?
Yeah.
But if you have a positive approach to the same things, you have, you're looking forward, you're filled with gratitude, you're doing the things, and so on and so forth, you can actually enhance and help and so on and so forth, right? So
Brilliant.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's the third variable. And then the fourth and the fifth are your lifestyle and your diet, right?
Okay.
Which is,
Now,
how you live your life, and the diet is what you consume on an ongoing basis, right? In
and for a
fact,
lot of people in today, especially listening to this podcast, I think that's in our control.
yeah, exactly, right?
Right.
And as far as your diet goes, there's this old Ayurvedic saying which says, if your diet is not right, if your diet is not right, then medicine is of no use. And it goes on to say, if your diet is right, then medicine is of no need.
Nice.
So that's the point, right? I mean, Hippocrates is the founder of modern medicine, quote unquote, modern medicine,
Yeah.
said, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food, right?
Mm.
So the point being that what we consume is actually our medicine. And if it's good, it's nutritious, it's nurturing, then you don't need any medicine. And if it's not nurturing, it's harmful, it's hurtful, it's in fact inhibiting your ability to do many things, then it's only then is when you need to intervene with medicine.
Yeah, in fact, I mean, this is not from a very personal observation. If you have a bad stomach because of whether you have had excessive late nights, or whether you've had, if cigarettes don't agree with you, or you're you're having this lifestyle where you're partying late, eating junk food, or eating yummy food, which is at that time is delicious. If your stomach is bad, you cannot function. You, as a result, find yourself depressed. You find yourself unable to sort of have any immunity, and you live like that for years. And boom, one day you're like, what have I become?
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
in fact, a lot of Ayurveda, a lot of our ancient philosophy, a lot of Chinese medicine, a lot of many sort of, let's say, traditional rather alternative, quote unquote, mechanisms of medicine have always identified that everything starts in the gut.
Mm.
And the gut is just a receptor and a translator for what is happening, in terms of what you put into the gut. Right?
Yeah, it's crazy how real that is, because if your gut and not stomach, people think stomach and gut are the same thing, right? Like if your gut is not healthy, nothing is functioning. Like you can tell by your skin, by your, as you said, the blood work levels, all those things, parameter levels. Right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So the diet is very crucial, very important, and your lifestyle is very crucial, very important. And those two things are firmly in your control. Right?
Yeah.
Now, as far as your genes and your environment and your mental health, or rather your mindset, those are also to some extent in your control, but these are clearly on a day-to-day basis in your control, right? And one needs to work on them if one needs to reverse those conditions, which I spoke about, those precursors, to ensure that those diseases don't manifest, to ensure your lifespan and your health span is optimized.
Okay. Can I just ask a quick question? I've been doing that all along. But what I mean by these 5 things, right? If we put lifestyle and diet up top before genes, or say environment or mental health, can by having a good balanced lifestyle and diet, can we influence the other 3?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, your lifestyle and your diet is influencing your genes 100%.
Right. Okay.
That's what's called epigenetics, right?
So it is important. We can put these 2 points up top, and as a result, the other 3 can be not disciplined, but can be dealt with more efficiently, right? Okay.
Yeah. In fact, like I said, your lifestyle and your diet is influencing your genes. I mean, it's actually directly telling your genes how to manifest. It's telling your genes to shut off, this gene and activate this gene and, manifest over here and do this and do that based on the environment that you're giving it.
Okay.
And the nutrition that you're giving it. So that is exactly correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So lifestyle and diet. Yeah. So these are the 2 things which are in your control. You can work upon it. You can do something about it. And that's essentially what one needs to focus on, right? So I said, okay, great, Sandeep. I found the answer. Now, what the hell do I do? What is the right lifestyle? What is the right diet?
Right. Yeah.
That one needs to adhere to, so that I can reverse those conditions, those precursors, so I can ensure that those diseases don't manifest in me, so that my lifespan and my health span is optimized.
Right.
And I'm searching for the answer. Yeah. And I read and I read and I read and I read and I read. Yeah. Unfortunately, I found conflicting, contradicting, confusing, and confounding data, right? One guy says you should eat 6 times a day. One guy says you should eat once a day or 2 times a day.
Yeah.
One guy says you should, be vegetarian, and another guy says you should be only non-vegetarian. One guy says you should run, and one guy says you should not run. You should walk. Yeah. One guy says, in fact, you should run very fast. And the other guy says, no. You should not do that.
Sleep. Yeah.
Sleep. Right? And unfortunately, all of them have scientific evidence to prove that their approach is the right approach.
Ouch. Oh.
So they've got double-blind, placebo-controlled trials, gold standard, research reports showing how by being a vegetarian you can reverse everything in the world. And somebody else has got double-blind, placebo-controlled, blah 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 studies and stuff like that, showing by approach using their stuff how you can reverse everything in the world. Unfortunately, they both are contradicting each other. And therefore, for a layman or a lay person like me, it makes my life extremely difficult because I'm not able to understand what the hell is the reality and what the hell is, not the reality in this case, right?
Yeah.
Because it's conflicting, it's contradicting, it's confusing, it's confounding, right? And so I am sitting here and I'm completely confused with what to do. And that's the situation I was in. I said,
it's almost like, can I go to a doctor and just fix this?
It's easier to go to a doctor.
This is too much. I'm drowning in information, which is,
right. But the good news, while I make these statements, the good news, I keep making this point, is that the reality is that there are many paths to the top of the mountain.
Right.
You can get to the top of the mountain through the north face, the south face, the east face, the west face, and everything in between. Now, some of those paths might be a little bit more difficult, right? You might need to climb a cliff before you get there. And some of those paths might be more well-trodden because many people have gotten up to that path. Because and therefore it's easier to get to the top of the mountain using that path. But the reality is that many of these paths lead to the same thing, right? So then then you sit back and reflect and you say, listen, it ain't so bad because you can follow this approach or that approach or a keto diet or a vegan diet or so on and so forth, and also get to the top of the mountain. But if you did one of those things, then you need to be aware that there are other things that you're compromising on. And so you have to supplement yourself with B12. If you're vegan, you have to supplement yourself, make sure you're getting adequate protein, you're doing this, that, and the other. If you're a carnivore, you need to make sure you have adequate vitamin C and, whatever else, right? So, so the point that I'm trying to make is that there are multiple paths and, and therefore, but however, each of them is fraught with their own challenges, risks, and dangers. So this is the situation I was in. I was like, confronted by conflicting, contradicting, confusing data, and I was just confounded with what to do about it. Yeah.
Right.
And however, I embarked upon something that I said, listen, what do I do at this stage? Right? And I said, listen, when you have conflicting data, you can't come to a finding. And if you can't come to a finding, you can't come to a conclusion. If you can't come to a conclusion, you can't come to a recommendation.
Yeah.
Because the data inherently is conflicting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So what I said was, listen, I need a guiding principle that is going to help me sieve through this data, pull out what is relevant in the context of that guiding principle, and then enable me to accomplish my goals and objectives. And the guiding principle I used was something called Pareto's principle. I don't know if you're familiar with Pareto's principle, but Pareto was this medieval economist during medieval times who found the 80-20 rule, right? So
okay.
He found,
I've heard the 80-20 principle.
Yeah, right. You heard that. Yeah, so 80% of the wealth of Italy was concentrated in 20% of the people. He found if you went to a garden, 80% or a field, 80% of the crop came from 20% of the land. And you'll find that in life, right? Maybe it may not be 80-20, but you'll find that 80% of your customers give you 20% of your, 80% of your sales comes from 20% of your customers. You'll find 80% of your profitability comes from 20% of your customers. If you go into your own wardrobe, you'll find 80% of the time you're wearing the 20% of the clothes. If you go to the kitchen, you'll find 80% of the time you're eating the same 20% of the food that you make in the house. So this is repeated on an ongoing basis. The point being, what is that small set of activities or 20% of things I can do that ensures that I get 80% of the benefits, and therefore I'll just focus on that 20% rather than try to get everything done.
Got it. Yeah. Okay.
So that was the goal and that was the intention, right? So rather than trying to do everything, let's just focus on that 20%.
Which in itself is quite self-defeating, right? You try to do everything and you end up doing nothing, right? So
Exactly. And that's the point, right? Because in the pursuit, I keep making this point, don't let progress be the enemy of perfection, right? Or rather, don't let perfection be the enemy of progress.
Right. Because if you continue to be overwhelmed, then nothing gets done.
Just get overwhelmed, right? Let's just take one step at a time. Let's just progress a little bit. Let's get better. Let's get better. Let's get better. And, just because we're trying to be perfect doesn't mean we can't progress.
Small wins.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So that's the goal and that's the approach that I use. I said, listen, what is the 80-20? And based on the 80-20, I started looking around, so on and so forth. And I came up with certain conclusions and I applied those conclusions to myself. And that's the journey that I've been on. Right. So just to give you a quick nutshell in terms of what I found, Sandeep, that there are two hormones in your body you need to regulate. If you're able to regulate these two hormones, 80% of your problems in life are sorted. And the two hormones.
This is where we cut the podcast.
Yeah, that's right. So I went searching for this magic sauce, because if you find this magic sauce, you've accomplished your goals, right? Because you've accomplished 80% of the challenges by doing 20% of the things. And that's phenomenal, right? And so I found that magic sauce, and I'm going to reveal that to you today.
Okay, brilliant.
Right. So basically, I came to the conclusion that there are two hormones in your body you need to regulate, and if you're able to regulate these two hormones, 80% of your problems in life are sorted out.
Okay.
From the cascade that I told you, your life in the sense you still have other challenges, but in terms of reversing those precursors, in terms of the disease challenges, and in terms of essentially increasing your health span and your lifespan.
Right.
So these two hormones are, the first is insulin and the second is cortisol.
Right.
And if you're able to actually manage these two hormones, you are in good shape.
Okay.
And so then I set about understanding both these hormones, obviously, and also in terms of identifying what I can do to manage my insulin and cortisol levels.
Right. Okay.
And that's the journey that I've been on. And I found that once you're able to manage your insulin and cortisol levels and keep them at the right level, it does not mean at a low level or it does not mean at a high level, at the optimal
level. Yeah.
When you're able to do that, then a lot of these challenges will start to go away and you will reverse a whole bunch of issues. Now, of course, it's 80-20, so you still may not be 100% there, but you will ensure that significant portion of your metabolic health is within your control.
You've cleared up a lot of the rubble, so you can at least see some shape of the structure underneath, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So should I just tell you very quickly what insulin is, what is cortisol, and then we can get into it, or do you want to sort of go down another path?
I think these are important. Yet I think we can cover this, but also just kind of go maybe into detail about how I think immediate effects and also long term, maybe just on these 2 points, because I think these two are so related to lifestyle, and I think it's important to understand how it can have effects in the short term, but also affect your health span and lifespan. So maybe I think it's important to sit on this for a while, if that's good with you.
Yeah. So let me just tell you very quickly about insulin. So insulin is also called the energy storage hormone. So fundamentally what happens in your body is that you eat a meal and your meal gets digested in the form of fat, sugars, glucose, as well as proteins, vitamins, nutrients, minerals, so on and so forth. And it's circulating in your bloodstream to be disposed of or to be attracted by the different cells that require those different nutrients. Yeah? Now, one of the things that's circulating in your blood is insulin. And high levels of insulin, one of the things that's circulating in your blood is glucose, which is sugar.
Right. Everything gets broken down.
And high levels of sugar causes a whole bunch of challenges, right? So you'll find that elevated sugar, essentially, it sort of, let's say, rusts all your organs in your body.
Okay.
Rust is not the right word, but it sort of decays. All your organs decay, right? So, your kidneys will start failing and so on and so forth if you have elevated levels of sugar circulating in your bloodstream over extended periods of time. Right?
It's almost like your blood becomes caramel, right? It's almost
exactly.
visual.
Yeah? So it gets glycated. That's true. It does. Yeah. So there's exactly. There's challenges downstream in terms of it going into these small little vascular areas, resulting in a whole bunch of challenges, including things like ED, kidney disease and so on and so forth. Yeah. So in terms of what one needs to do and understand insulin. So the job of insulin is the body, when this blood sugar goes up, the body releases this hormone called insulin. The job of insulin is to go pull out the blood sugar, pull out the sugar from the blood and store it or shuttle it into your different cells. Yeah?
Okay.
And it starts by shuttling it into your muscle cells, right? So it shuttles it into your muscle cells, it knocks on the door, the muscle opens the door, and insulin shuttles this through a transporter called GLUT4 into the muscle cells. And the muscle accepts it and says, thank you very much, and uses it as a source of energy whenever it requires it.
Right.
So insulin does that. Now, over a period of time, as it keeps shuttling this insulin into different cells, you will find that the body starts to get accustomed to this signal that insulin is generating, and the body says, "Hey, listen, I'm not going to open the door, right? Because you keep on banging this door on me all the time. I've decided I'm not going to open the door."
Right. So literally your muscle's tired of taking in more. Yeah.
And so then what happens, your blood sugar goes up because it can't shuttle it into the muscle cells. And then the body goes into panic mode and says, no, I have to shuttle into the muscle, man. Please open the door. And the way it increases the volume of the knock is that it increases the amount of insulin in circulation, right? Therefore, by increasing the amount in circulation, now the volume of that knock on that muscle cell is increased. And now the muscle has to open the door and allow the glucose to come in.
Okay. Yeah?
And so then we're on this continuous, downhill journey from then onwards, right? So it's like if you're I don't know, I'm sure you've been in a shower where, after some time, the hot water starts to feel a bit warm, and you need to turn up the temperature, and then slowly you need to turn up the temperature again, and you need to turn up the temperature again because your body's getting accustomed and used to that level of temperature. Right. Yeah. And that's exactly what's happening in your muscle cells. Your cells are saying, hey, listen, I've been hearing this knock. It's too, you keep on knocking on the door. So I reduce the sensitivity of that knock. So reduce the sensitivity of insulin. And so now the body has to create more insulin to shuttle the cells, and more insulin and more insulin and more insulin until you reach a stage where your body cannot produce any more insulin because your pancreas produces a finite quantity of insulin.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And if your body cannot produce any further insulin, Now the body says, where the hell do I get this additional insulin to go and knock on all the doors of all these damn muscle cells from, right? And so what happens then? What happens then is the blood sugars start to go up because the muscle is not opening the door, right?
Right.
And as the blood sugars start to go up, you start getting quote unquote diabetes. And then you go to the doctor and you say, doctor, my blood sugars are high. The doctor says, yeah, your blood sugars are high. And what does the doctor do? The doctor gives you more insulin, right?
Jesus Christ. So your doctors become your dealer.
Yeah, exactly. This is correct. So it's almost like if you're an alcoholic, Sandeep, and if I come to your house and I sit down and my hands are shivering, you give me 2 shots of tequila, okay, my hands will stop shivering, but you've not addressed my condition of alcoholism, right?
Yeah.
In fact, the next time I come to your house and sit down, you might need to give me 4 shots of tequila. And the following year, you need to give me a bottle of tequila, right?
Crazy,
or at least half a bottle of tequila, right? For my hands to stop shivering, because we've not addressed the underlying condition. And this is exactly what is happening in the world today, which is insulin levels are getting higher and higher and higher because it's not able to dispose of.
So sorry, is that what is referred to as insulin resistance?
Exactly, right? Your body is becoming resistant to the signal of insulin.
Right.
And when the body becomes resistant to the signal of insulin, you need more insulin to get that body to actually open up the door. Yeah?
That just sounds crazy that a doctor gives you, depending on the level of your sugar, from anything from medicine to insulin injections. Yeah. And what do you do then? You just go eat another, like a pizza or like cake or pasta or whatever it may be. I mean, I'm not criticizing anyone for this. This is, I don't have insulin, I don't have diabetes, but like, what do you do when you feel down? You pop food in your mouth, right?
No,
it's such an obvious reaction, but it's little known that it's doing this to your entire sort of beautifully designed system, which is able to process and absorb and create and preserve. And we're just throwing in, like almost putting these obstacles in its way, which just get more magnified.
Yeah, and we dysregulated the whole thing. In fact, I remember meeting a friend of mine, and he's highly diabetic, and I saw him sort of, consuming ice cream. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, no, I just had a shot of insulin. And so
oh, God.
So before my blood sugar crashes, I need to have some ice cream, right?
Oh, my God.
So it's like the tail wagging the dog,
I mean, if you saw someone who's a heroin addict shooting up, going, no, I'm going to have the shot, you'll stop them. He's like, dude, what are you doing? But clearly society's like, no, it's okay. Would you like extra hot chocolate sauce on that, right?
Exactly. Right. And unfortunately, this is a condition that you are stuck with for the rest of your life. So it's worse than a drug dealer, because at least a drug dealer, first of all, your lifespan is pretty much less,
or he might get arrested or something, right?
Or he might get arrested or, whatever, right? Here, they literally are selling you quote unquote drugs which will keep you alive. Now, of course, the benefits are amazing. I mean, if you have, for instance, type 1 diabetes where your pancreas cannot produce any insulin,
right?
Then
that is an issue. That's a medical condition, right? That's not true environment.
So you have to depend upon this, in which you're getting exogenous insulin injected into your body. Otherwise, your blood sugars will go crazy, right? Because you don't have any ability to.
And you can die from excessive blood sugar.
Exactly,
that's something.
Exactly, right. Yeah. So so that's great, but in the context of type 2 diabetes, I think the challenge is we're just continuing to become more and more alcoholics as a consequence of this situation, and we're not addressing the root cause, as I told you earlier. Right?
So building up more and more intolerance, insulin resistance,
more and more insensitive,
and that same cycle you said, the dosage keeps increasing, then the other issues surrounding this start, and then we just become a car with multiple broken parts. Yeah,
exactly, right. So what we need to do is actually stop this cycle, right? So we need to make the body more sensitive to insulin.
Right.
And and so what do you do about that? So so there are a bunch of things one can do in terms of making the body more sensitive to insulin, including reducing the load of insulin required. Right? So if your blood glucose is 200, then there's a certain amount of insulin you need. If your blood glucose is only 130, then there's a different amount of insulin.
Yeah. And the body has a way of taking away excess even though you have insulin resistance, your body can come back to balance, right?
Exactly. You can resensitize your body to insulin.
Right. So your body's not just going to be like, hey, you've done this to me now, that's it. There's no coming back. Exactly. It does come back to equilibrium if you give it a chance.
This is the beauty of the body. Yeah, this is the beauty of the body, right? The body is so resilient. It's phenomenal. It's quite amazing what the body
it's brilliant, because anyone else would just be like, there's no saving this guy. But the body is like, no, I'll come back. Give me a chance. Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't even need that long of a chance, Sandeep. This is the beauty of the body. The body says, dude, don't even give me, I don't need 10 years or 20 years to, you've been abusing me for 40 years.
Yeah.
Right? Give me 3 months, 4 months, and I'll be back to normal.
Wow. That is mind-blowing. Like, now I was telling you on the call, I'm a smoker and I've smoked for 20 years and now I've been close to a year off cigarettes, completely off.
Yeah.
I mean, and sometimes you're like, oh, my stomach. And then I'm like, wait a second, you've done this to your body for 20 years. Give it a little chance to come back, right? And we don't do that. We want a one-day fix.
Yeah, we want a one-day fix, right? And my point is actually just give it 3 months, give it 6 months, and it will be fixed. That's the beauty of the body. It's so resilient. It's mind-blowing. It's amazing. It's regenerative, right? So it can be reversed. A lot of those conditions can be reversed, right?
Good to hear
insulin sensitivity can be enhanced. The resistance that you have to insulin can be reversed, and you can
just stop spiking those sugar levels every 3 hours. Stop eating like chips and snacks and.
I mean, there's a bunch of things to do, but the point is, if you're in the shower and you're getting accustomed to that, like hot water and then warm water and hot water and warm water, the first thing is just get out of the damn shower, man.
Yeah. Just switch off the water for some time. Yeah. Stop eating.
Switch off the damn water for some time, right?
Yeah.
Get out of the shower. Then we can start
then
thinking
take stock.
Yeah, exactly. Then we can start thinking about what we can do. But at least, like they keep saying, right? If you're in a hole and you're the first thing to do is stop digging.
Yeah.
So that is insulin for you, right?
Yeah.
So if you're able to make your body highly sensitive to insulin, I am of the firm belief that is the central axis in which most metabolic disease sort of revolves around, right?
Right.
Which is the inability to make your inability of your body to or the dysregulation of glucose in your body and the inability to keep your body sensitive to the insulin signal.
And glucose isn't required, just to make that clear. People do, your muscles need it, everything needs it to function. So if it's not, it's the problem with this is that it's too much glucose is running around in the blood, not being used. So it's not it's inefficiency. Nothing's getting it. It's just sitting there. It's like a bad supply chain thing, right? It's there, but it's not being used.
Yeah. Glucose is required. All nutrients are required, right? At the right doses, at the right levels.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have this mismatch in today's society where, we've sort of hyper exaggerated, everything that we need to or we want to that is desirable. And the body is not accustomed and attuned to those levels of exposure. And that's what's causing, these challenges to manifest in the first place.
The levels, okay.
But the body does. I mean, the brain requires glucose to run. And if it doesn't have glucose, it creates its own glucose. Through a process called gluconeogenesis, right? So, where it'll burn your muscle, it'll burn your protein and create glucose so that there's adequate glucose to fuel your brain and your central nervous system.
So one of these key underlying things that keep coming up from what you've said over the past hour or so is don't get in the way of your body.
As simple as that, Sandeep. Simple as that. Just get out of the way. Just get out of the way. You don't need to do anything Herculean. You don't need to be a superstar. You don't need to do anything. Just get out of the way. And the body knows how. We have a beautiful body. We have a beautiful, set of, which is evolved from millions of years of, experimentation and testing and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
And so it's highly resilient. But the point is, we come in the way of the body.
Right.
And all we need to do is just get out of the way. Exactly. You're right. You're 100% correct. Yeah. So I was just continuing that path. So insulin resistance. So insulin is the first hormone. So if you're able to get out of the way and make sure insulin is regulated and your blood sugars are within control, and operating at the right levels, that is a key part of achieving metabolic fitness, right? The second hormone is a hormone called cortisol.
Right.
And cortisol is also called the stress hormone, right? And so what happens is in the old days, when a bear came and attacked you, or you were confronted by the bear, you got into something called fight or flight, which is either you run away from the bear or you fight against the bear. And those are your only two options.
There's no
And
diplomacy at this point.
yeah, exactly, right. Or you freeze. That's actually another option as well.
Yeah.
But that's not
You've
a
seen that
viable option.
develop in certain. I think that there's some goat that does that, just falls over. Just
Yeah. Some reptiles also do that. They just sort of pretend to be
be
dead.
dead. Right.
Yeah. But anyway, so the point is either you run or you stay there and fight against that bear, which activates the synthetic nervous system. Now, when you do that, you actually release a whole cascade of hormones, including adrenaline, epinephrine, norepinephrine, so on and so forth. One of them is cortisol.
Yeah.
And the job of cortisol is to help you address this fight or flight, or to, and the cascade of all these hormones is to help you address fight or flight, which is to make you more resilient in the face of that bear.
Right.
And the way it does that is it shuts down your digestive system, it shuts down your immune system, it increases your heart rate, it increases your blood pressure, and it dramatically shuts down your insulin sensitivity, right? Because it says, hey, listen, I don't want you to be shuttling all that glucose into the muscle. In fact, I want you to release glucose from your liver so that I can access it when I'm running away from the bear. Right?
Okay.
So I need the energy. I need to fight against this bear. Yeah. So these are all phenomenal things which are great in the short term, but very harmful for you in the long run, right?
Yeah, I can imagine
because in the short term, essentially what the body's saying is, hey, listen, instead of digesting my lunch today, let me focus on the bear. Otherwise, I'm going to become the lunch of the bear.
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on that small little cut across my cheek, let me focus on this tiger in front of me, because there's going to be a massive cut across my entire face if I don't do that. Right? So it prioritizes and collates and corrals all the resources of the body to focus on the threat at hand, which is this bear.
Right.
And to ensure that you survive the bear attack, which is fantastic in that situation.
Because you live another day. You are able to attend to the other work. Yeah,
exactly. Right. Now, this is fantastic in the short term. Unfortunately, it is harmful to you because it's, screwing up your digestive system, and so on and so forth. Right. Now, this is great. However, unfortunately, in our lives, Sandeep, we are confronted by mini bears. Yeah. So we've got these stressors. So it's like, coming back to your initial question, really, for me, right, which is, what will people think of me? What is my status? What is my financial situation? Do I have adequate money? Do I have adequate resources? Am I going on the right vacation? Am I, so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
And these are mini bears which are sitting on your shoulder, and they're not running away. They're not going away. They're sitting there whole day and night. Yeah. And they're not shutting down your digestive system, but they're impairing your digestive system. They're not shutting down your immune system, but they're impairing your immune system.
Right. It's not at optimal. Yeah.
It's not. Exactly. Yeah. And so that's the challenge then, right? So cortisol, elevated levels of cortisol and dysregulated cortisol, cycles is causing an impairment of your digestive system, your immune system, your heart rate, your blood pressure levels, and your insulin sensitivity. Right. So unfortunately, we are in this vicious cycle now where we have dysregulated cortisol levels, which is leading to dysregulated insulin levels, which is leading to dysregulated. So we're in this unfortunate vicious cycle. Right?
So the body is constantly, for a long-term thinking, it's either fighting or fleeing, which is not, as you said, it's just it's prioritizing that over living.
Exactly, right. And so one needs to ensure that one needs to, not be in this stressed out flight or flight, mode all the time, and address that challenge on hand. So, based on everything that I did, all the research that I did, I finally came to the conclusion to be in a virtuous cycle. One needs to regulate your insulin levels and one needs to regulate your cortisol levels, which, insulin level regulation happens by making the body more sensitive to insulin as a consequence of the diet and the lifestyle that you choose to pursue. And regulating your cortisol levels is a consequence of the lifestyle and diet that you pursue, so that you ensure that those levels are also maintained. Yeah. And then the question becomes, what is the right diet and lifestyle to make sure that these two hormones are optimized? Yeah. Right. And so that was the journey I was on.
No, and I think that's brilliant, because the thing is that it's such a complex thing what you've broken down through various attempts and through various and lots of research into these things. And of course, it might seem like, oh, that's it, but no. And I think we can sort of, I don't know, maybe a couple of basic tips, I think, because you do have this plan to help 1 billion people. I want you to talk about that before we wrap up today. And as you've said to me on the phone call privately and also here, it's each person is different. Each person is unique. Each person has their own optimal performance, their own levels that are suitable for them, their environment in which they thrive, and also certain limitations. So maybe before we wrap up, maybe if you can give a couple of pointers with lifestyle and diet, which are generic to people, which can be a good starting point, and then maybe tell people who are listening now about your plan and how they can reach you, and then we can just sort of wrap up that for today.
Sure. So in terms of a few pointers, if you will, right, on how to make this better, I think let me break them down into diet pointers and some lifestyle pointers.
Super.
So in terms of some lifestyle pointers, I call them scaffolding, if you will, right? So basic foundational things that one needs to have to ensure that one is in the right place. Yeah. The first is sleep. Unfortunately, we have this tendency in the whole world where we deprioritize sleep. Everything else is prioritized, before sleep. Yeah. And that's the big challenge. We as human beings, we've not been able to evolve away from sleep. And sleep, if you think about it, 10,000 years ago, while we were in the jungle, in the prairie, wherever we were, if you were fast asleep, you were obviously subject to prey, right? Because you were susceptible, because you were sleeping. And therefore, the body, or at least human beings, should have evolved a way in which stronger people who could sleep less were actually, prioritized towards and selected for through evolution.
Yeah.
And people who slept longer were deprioritized and deselected, if you will.
Yeah.
That should have happened, but that hasn't happened, right? So we still require the same amount of sleep, the same 8 hours of sleep, because it's such a restorative process in which nature is telling us, I don't mind you dying. I need you to.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing that the body is like, yeah, it's okay if you don't wake up ever, but I need this sleep.
Exactly, right? Yeah, exactly, right? So the body is saying, listen,
it's a good joke. It's a good one.
Nature is saying, yeah, I don't mind if you wake, never wake, but right now you need to be sleeping.
I think we can allow our body that. If everything is doing for us, one little joke is good. It's a good joke.
Yeah, exactly, right? So sleep is one of them. Next one, I think is some amount of movement, exercise, whatever you want to call it, right?
Right.
Activity, and a lot of people, it's ingrained in their day-to-day life. So like, some people just by virtue of the occupation that they are in, right? They may be walking a lot, they may be running, they may be moving, they may be very active. While you have a whole bunch of other people who are sitting by the desk and not doing anything for a significant portion of time, they need to ensure that they are designing some amount of activity into their lives, some amount of movement into their lives, and some amount of cardio activity, as well as some amount of strength activity. Strength is actually very, very crucial, especially as we talk about health span. It's crucial that we protect our muscle mass as we grow older. Otherwise, we struggle with sarcopenia as we age. And sarcopenia is considered as probably the biggest challenge for all older people, in which there's muscle wasting, which is causing hip fracture, which is then causing you dramatically to restrict your movement and your life span and so on and so forth, right? So some amount of movement, some amount of physical activity, some amount of
strength.
Strength training is crucial and required, right? So that's the second point. The third is some level of gratitude, stress management, whatever you want to call it. The point is, we need to make sure that we're not too stressed out, going back to that cortisol point, right? And some of that could come from meditation, some of that could come from listening to music, some activity that you're pursuing, something that you're doing which is enabling you to do
sending the right message to your body that you're safe.
Sending the right message to your body. Exactly. That's the third. And the fourth that I'll just leave you guys with, and then we can discuss some of the things, is I believe that there's a strong community element. Man is a social being. the end of the day. All humans are social beings, right? So the ability to interact with other people, the ability to contribute towards their lives, the ability to have some purpose in your life, the ability to have fun with other people, the just general social aspects of life, whether in a structured manner or an unstructured manner. Structured means whether you're following a faith, you're going to a temple, there's a bunch of support people around you, or you're going to a church, there's or you're going to a dance club, or you're going to I don't know, wherever it is, right? Some community of people that you interact with, that you connect with, that gives you purpose and meaning.
Which was a no-brainer when you have 1.8 billion people in a geography as small as India. You'd think we'd be meeting at least, but no, we're more and more isolated, right?
Exactly.
Or we're isolating ourselves. It's not like anyone's doing it to us.
Exactly, right. And we are engaging in virtual, connections through social media and things like that, which are fine as a tool, but that we need to make sure that we also are connecting with human beings. We are staying connected with people. We're staying connected with purpose. We're staying connected. Yeah.
I mean, these are tools to enhance social interaction, not replace.
Exactly. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So these are some of the things, that I think from a sort of, let's say, scaffolding standpoint, from an outside standpoint, that are important, right? So in terms of diet, 3-4 tips that I can give you. I think the first point that I want to make is that it's important that we don't keep stimulating the glucose response on an ongoing basis. Basically, get out of the shower, right? So eating 6 meals a day, 10 meals a day, 20 meals a day may not be the best advice. Now,
don't keep feeding your body, right?
Yeah, if you're a bodybuilder and you're trying to put on muscle mass and you're really focused on that, or if you're an Olympic athlete, or where nutrition is crucial and key, so that you're getting adequate leucine and protein and all of those things, then you may need to do that. But for the common person, right, you and me, basically, there's no need for us to be eating 6 meals a day, 8 meals a day.
But even the athletes are doing it for a purpose, for a short-term activity and result. They're not going to live their whole lives like that. It can't be done.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. But for you and me, I think, there's a concept called time restricted eating. Nowadays, there's a whole concept called intermittent fasting, which has gotten a big craze going on right now. But, I like to use the word time restricted eating, where you restrict the window during which period you eat or consume calories, which then restricts the time that your body is reacting to the glucose spikes and insulin is circulating during those periods of time, which then gives a period of rest during times when you're not spiking glucose, which allows your body to slowly become more and more insulin sensitive as time progresses.
So what is your hours? What kind of restricted window?
So typically what I do, Sandeep, is I do like I restrict my eating to like 6 to 8 hours a day.
Okay.
And I do that on Tuesday through Saturday. On Sundays, I eat 3 meals. So I eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I break my fast at 9 o'clock in the morning, 8:39, whenever. And then on Mondays, I do what I call as a metabolic Monday, where I do a 24-hour fast. So I don't eat anything from Sunday night to Monday night. Yeah.
Okay. So but you do liquids and you do like tea and coffee.
No, tea, okay. But nothing that stimulates glucose.
Right. So no sweetened tea. Right. Yeah. Just. Okay. Okay. So you do an 16 to 18 hour fast every day from Tuesday to Saturday. Saturday you do Sunday you do a entire 3 days, 3 meals a day, and then from Sunday night to Monday night you're complete off. Okay.
Exactly.
Nice. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's what I do. And then, every now and then, I'll just sprinkle in a fast if I need to. And then, over the past few years, I've done a few extended fasts. So I've done like a 5-day fast. I've done, 3-day fast and stuff like that. Right.
I think this topic, I want to get you back on for, because just to guide people, because many times, people will say intermittent fasting, they think not eating for 12 hours is that, but it could also, this extended fast is actually what intermittent fasting is, when you go for at least 24 to 36 hours without food. But also many times people will say it on a podcast, but what does it feel like to go through it on day 3, on day 4, on when, my God, is it okay to eat now? Like, oh my God, what do people say? Because a lot of times this is kind of, the outlet for this is social media. People are like, oh my God, you can do it, 21 days, no food, like, the challenges which you've seen. So I think it's important. Yeah.
And it's very important what you break your fast with. After 5 days, if you go ballistic with, there's an approach to break it. Otherwise, it's very unhealthy. Yeah.
Correct, because that could be, in a way, you're assaulting your body with this barrage of toxins. It could be, right, if you don't know what you're putting in. So I think that's very important, but I don't think I want to sort of just do this on the surface. I'd like to get you back when you have time for just that, like, this intermittent fasting, the diets, how to eat, as you told me earlier, what to eat, when to eat, how to eat it. I don't want to take away from the depth of your research in that space, but I think just for people to have just a glossary of what options are there. I think this is where we can sort of take a couple more points and leave them with this.
Yeah. And related to this, like you just said, I firmly, people keep asking me, what should I eat, right? And I make the point that more important than what you eat is when you eat, where you eat, and how you eat. Right? Most of us, coming back to the when you eat is exactly what we just spoke about now, but also the where you eat, and then the how you eat, right? So a lot of us are sitting in front of the television, just popping popcorn, mindlessly chomping on that, and we consume a huge quantity of that because we're just distracted, right? As opposed to sitting in the dining table with your family, appreciating the food, tasting every aspect of the food, being thankful for the food that you have, which just gets the digestive juices to work much more efficiently, which gets you to digest the food much better, absorb the nutrients in a much better fashion. So that's equally important, which we all gloss over a lot of times.
Right.
So that's one. The second one, I would say from a diet standpoint, is if we can, avoid as much as possible all the processed foods that are out there, right? Now, this is a difficult thing to do because, what is processed and what is not processed. So typically I have a framework in which I say, listen, there's processing, there's mechanical processing, there's chemical processing. And things like mechanical processing is like rice that is ground up into something else, into some powder, right? That's like a mechanical process. Or wheat, which is ground up into flour, right? That's a mechanical process. Or the first phase of that, which is just rice, which is dehusked, is also a mechanical process.
It's a process, right?
Yeah. And then the next phase of that is the same rice, which is ground up into a powder to make rice flour. Right. Then the next phase of that is some chemicals added to it. And then the final phase of that is a whole bunch of chemicals added to it, which makes it look and taste and feel like it's completely different from what we started off with. So my bias is towards this latter 2 points, if you will, right? Where any external ingredients which are added to those foods typically tend to be harmful to your gut microbiome, typically tend to be harmful, typically are manufactured by big food companies whose only goal is to make sure that you consume more of it, and they tend to have negative consequences on the body, right? So in my opinion, things like, sauces and biscuits and cakes and, cookies and, juices and, so on and so forth, like your aerated drinks and soft drinks and so on and so forth, tend to be things that one needs to avoid.
So what about someone, just to throw a counterpoint at you, what if someone says, no, but I know my baker, I know the bakery, I know the patisserie, wherever I get my cookie, I know they use oatmeal and I know that the ingredients are organic or they are healthy. So what would you say to someone like that?
So absolutely. So if you're baking the cookie yourself, or if you know exactly who's baking it, you can have it, but but you have to recognize that it's still a processed food, and therefore it's going to escalate or elevate your blood sugars in the short term. Now, if you're sensitive enough such that it doesn't have a big impact on you because your insulin sensitivity is fantastic, then go ahead, do it. No problem. But that's why context is so important on this, Sandeep. Right? So you can't just sort of
I also wanted to throw that point there because a lot of people give you that argument. No, but I bake my own thing. So just for people to know why you're saying these things.
Yeah, right. And for you, it might work for you. But for me, it might be really harmful because I'm way past that journey of insulin sensitivity, and I need to sort of reverse that condition. Correct. And so it's creating a huge blood glucose spike. And if I can see that blood glucose spike, which is coming as a consequence of me eating that cookie, then that's a challenge for me. But for you, it might be perfectly fine. It's okay. You can have that cookie every now and then, or you can have it more frequently, especially if you're confident of the ingredients that are going into it and the process which is employed in terms of manufacturing that particular cookie. right? So context is so important. That's why it's important to customize a lot of this to that particular. Yeah. So, but generally speaking, processed foods tend to be more stimulating of the insulin response and more sort of glucose, challenges, and they tend to be with a bunch of preservatives and artificial colors, flavors, sweeteners, shelf stabilizing agents. They tend to have emulsifiers. They tend to, generally speaking, they tend to have all these things. Because at the end of the day, the food manufacturing company, I used to run a retail chain, right? So for us, shelf life was crucial. And if the shelf life of bread is 2 days versus another manufacturer whose shelf life is 5 days, guess which one I'm talking? And for that bread to have 5 days shelf life versus the 2 day shelf life, they're obviously putting something in that,
The one with 5 days doesn't, it resembles bread less than the 2 day one.
Yeah, exactly, right. So that's a little harmful to your gut microbiome, to your digestive system, because now it has to process all those preservatives and so on and so forth, right? So generally speaking, less preserved, less processed, less some of these things are
stuff that looks like itself is pretty good.
Yeah, there you go. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's the second point that I could say. The third small little hack or small little tip that I can give is ensure you have adequate hydration. Most of us tend to be dehydrated,
Okay.
So we're not consuming adequate amounts of water. As a consequence of that, a lot of times at 4 o'clock in the evening, we feel hungry, we feel famished. And that 4 o'clock evening event is actually thirst manifesting as hunger. Yeah.
That's crazy because I told you I've been doing the 21-hour fast, right? Between 20 and 21 hours. And, sometimes, people are, and I don't want it to be, because the moment you tell someone you're doing this, they're like, oh, that means I have to cook a separate thing for you. You're so inconveniencing everyone. I'm like, no, relax. I don't know why they have a strong South Indian accent, but that's pretty much what they sound like in my head. But sometimes, people at home are eating and I don't, the smell of food is lovely. Who wouldn't deny that? But I have a glass of fresh lime with, like, say, salt, and I feel full. I feel good. And that keeps me going till like 5 o'clock. And at about 4:35, again, I have like maybe a glass of hot water, maybe a cup of black tea without sugar. None of this is with sugar. And I feel great. And now by 6:37, when I'm ready to eat, I don't feel like I have to plow into food like a person who's not eaten in 21 hours.
Yeah.
So it's quite amazing
you're
what that point
flexible.
is.
Yeah, right. Because you're metabolically flexible now, right? Because you are able to, you're a hybrid car. You can use fat as well as glucose to run your engine. Yeah. And that's the benefit of doing this. But anyway, I guess we can, that's a...
I can change my name to Prius, I suppose.
There you go.
As I said earlier, that is a thing that's it's such an important thing to go into depth with, because these things, as you said, because a lot of people will read after this or before this, they've read and come, and they might just take, just enough to suit them. But I think someone like you who spent so much time, and I don't want to do a disservice to your research and the information and the time you spent by just saying, them going, oh, Raman said this, I can eat, just a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet for, I'll do it once a week and I'm fit, and then come back saying, why am I not fit? So I think if you do have the time at some point in the near future, come back as a sequel to this and just help people. I think, so I want you to just tell me before, you close maybe if anything you had left about the diet, but also about your plan to help the people, because I think that's something which is so magnanimous and generous in itself, which needs to be acknowledged.
So so in terms of diet, a few other small little pointers. Generally, I think most of us are deprioritizing or not consuming adequate quantities of protein. Now, of course, when I make that statement, people will go ballistic because protein is so individual, right? So for someone who's a bodybuilder, how much protein they require is fundamentally different from somebody who's an athlete, is different from someone who's a housewife, is different from somebody who's doing manual labor and work, is different from, so on. The point I'm trying to make is, I think most of us in our diets tend to have inadequate quantities of protein. And so we need to prioritize protein. I think that's a crucial point, which is that we need to get adequate amounts of protein as in the context of your own life, whatever your life is, in terms of what your life is. adequate quantities of protein is required.
So basically, if you're going to go sit at your desk at the office for 8 hours, don't eat 40 egg whites. It's not good.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it.
Yeah.
But another way of looking at it is that if you are going to be engaging in a whole bunch of activities,
Yeah.
then protein because protein is one of those of the three nutrients, which is carbohydrates, fats, and proteins.
Yeah.
Protein is required for the structural integrity of your body.
Right.
It's required to build your bones, you build for your skin, for your nails, for your hair, for all the hormones that are generated, for all the enzymes that are created, for the muscle that you have, and so on and so forth, right?
So basically, don't play tennis for 3 hours and eat like a salad. It's not going to give your body the the concrete it needs to.
Yeah. So if you compromise on that structural element, it's almost like bricks in a house, right? So if you don't have adequate amount of bricks, how the hell are you going to make the house?
Yeah.
Or the house will start crumbling. So you're right. So if you're exercising and doing a whole bunch of activities and having just a small little salad with inadequate protein, then you're doing a disservice to your body, and your muscles will slowly start wasting away, and that's not what you want, right? So you want to have the stimulus, which is the exercise, adequately supported by the substrate, which is a protein, which will ensure that your body structure is maintained. Yeah?
Okay.
So that's the point, right? So, but again, it's a very individual point. So, but generally speaking, we need to prioritize protein. Yeah?
Right.
And then the last point I just want to mention is that we tend to consume way too much in terms of added sugars. Yeah. Whether it's in our Cokes or our Red Bulls or our whatever it is. Yeah. Fruit juices. Fortified juices or liqueurs or desserts and a whole host of other things that we eat.
Even your energized waters, like your Gatorades and all, are lethal with sugar, right?
Very high quantities of sugar, correct?
Yeah.
Right. So all those things are causing, as I said, insulin spikes. Glucose spikes, and therefore insulin spikes.
Yeah.
And again, going back to that 80-20 rule, right? So if you want to maintain insulin levels and make your body more sensitive to insulin, then we need to ensure that we're not unnecessarily inundating the body with the requirement for higher levels of insulin, because as you inundate the body with higher levels of insulin requirement, you have challenges around managing the glucose levels, and your body starts to slowly get insensitive to those levels. Yeah. So that's the last point, which is sort of reduce the glucose footprint or the sugar footprint, or especially the added sugar footprint in terms of the diet.
I mean, it kind of ties in with it's kind of like a reminder, because you mentioned the sugar thing. So there's kind of a reminder saying, hey, you have to. It doesn't mean that it's only cake or biscuits, right? It's also there are other sources which we're unaware of, or not knowingly, unconsciously putting it into our body, just saying, yeah, but it's juice, it's orange juice, vitamin C, but no, it's got a concentrate dose that's going to spike your glucose, right? No, it's brilliant. Like someone like you sitting here, and you've done so much research, and someone will just blindly go to a doctor and get a pill. And I think it's commendable, and I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to share all this with me and people listening to this episode. And it's not easy. I mean, it's not easy to get through to people's actual mind and say, hey, wait a second, through their programming, to just say, this is how you have to think about your body. So I really hope that people do take you up with your information. People who have listened today really tune into the next time you're in, and also, but they can reach you if they want, because you are doing something which is even more to help a widely spread population. So could you just, before we sign off for today, just talk about that dream you have?
Yeah. So I, as continuing down this path where I've spoken about, where I firmly believe that blood glucose regulation is a central axis around all metabolic illnesses, right? And if one is able to regulate their blood glucose, then one is able to, significantly reverse challenges around metabolic disease, which then ensures your lifespan and health span is maximized and optimized. Yeah. So on that path, I mean, I've started a small little startup, and our goal is to essentially try to get people to improve their blood glucose regulation and as a consequence, improve their lifespan and their health span. So we have a goal in which, we have so to give you a little bit of context on this, there's a whole bunch of research which has just come out now in terms of measuring your biological age.
Yes, the inner clock, right?
Yeah, right. So your biological age, in which you're able to actually assess how old you're biologically and not chronologically. Chronologically is how many candles are there in your birthday cake.
Yeah, which shouldn't be there, by the way. It's not a cake.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Okay, how many times you've taken a spin around the sun? Right?
Yeah.
But the point is that is your chronological age, but your biological age is actually how old your body is.
Right.
And there's been a whole bunch of work from this guy called Steve Horvath, who's created this thing called the Horvath clock, where he looks at DNA methylation. So he looks at methyl markers within your DNA to determine, based on that, to determine how old one is, right?
The aging of the actual building block of your body.
Yeah, the aging of the body. And there's a whole variance around it, in terms of how you measure it. But it's actually, in my opinion, this guy is a genius. Yeah, he's going to, this is cornerstone work, which is really going to result in a whole bunch of improvements in terms of understanding of what interventions one can do to someone's life, and thereby reduce their biological age. Yeah, because you can actually measure it. Yeah,
that's brilliant.
Now Steve Horvath had this person called Morgan Levine working in his lab. And she's actually come out and developed, using some biomarkers in terms of coming up with, a similar calculation of biological age, which approximates his calculation of biological age, which is simple to calculate. So what we do is we help people. We actually calculate somebody's biological age. Then we look at interventions that we are doing in terms of diet, lifestyle, maybe some supplements, exercise, activity, nutrition, sleep, and a whole bunch of other variables, and then reassess what their age is after a certain period of intervention. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And typically we are seeing an improvement in biological age by anywhere from 5 to 7 to 10 years.
Whoa.
Right. With these interventions. Yeah.
And typically these people are in their 40s, 50s, 60s?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
40s, 50s, and
5 to 7 years is not a joke, because
it's not a joke, right?
It's almost like you can relive your entire 40s again if you're
that's the point. Yeah. And this is the point that, on another day we can talk about longevity and escape velocity and,
No, I'd love to do that, because I really think, I think we can do it sooner than later whenever you have time. But
yeah, sure. But in the interim, so there are mechanisms to calculate your biological age, and these interventions that we're talking about can help you improve your biological age by 5 to 7 years, 5 years, with some, concerted but not crazy interventions. We're not talking about genetic re-engineering, or we're not talking about CRISPR-Cas9 or any of those things, right? We're talking about basic stuff that we've been talking about all this time. Sleep,
those pointers, lifestyle, diet.
Exactly, lifestyle, diet stuff, right?
Yeah.
So the goal is to actually enhance people's lives by on average 5 years, and to do that with 200,000 people, right? And so my goal is to make a small dent in the universe in which I can contribute 1 million years of incrementally healthy living to humanity.
It's 1 million years. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I thought I got the number wrong. Okay, 200,000 people, 5 years. Okay.
Yeah, right. So 1 million years of healthy living for humanity, which translates into, a whole bunch of improvements in people's health span and lifespan ultimately. And that's the goal that we're working towards.
That is very noble indeed. I'm not saying this lightly, because it takes a lot to be selfless in this particular aspect, right? So you can, especially with health, like, I'm healthy, doesn't matter. But I know personally people who you've helped, and I'm so glad that you took the time to talk to me and to share all this information with people who've tuned in, and to give people a chance that there is hope besides just popping pills and being subject to a barrage of intimidating medical interventions, which you might not need. Of course, no one's dismissing that doctors aren't required or important and mean well. Hospitals also are required, but you can take you can take these things into your own hands, and you can, as you said, be the CEO of your own body and mind, and do to a large extent things which are simple. And I think fundamentally, as we've discussed, don't get the hair, don't get in the way of your body.
Absolutely, absolutely,
But
absolutely.
lovely. No, I think it's really superb that we could chat today. Thank you so much, Raman, for taking the time and for taking all the energy to share what you have. I really appreciate it. And on behalf of everyone listening, all the best for the 1 million years of healthy living, a longer lifespan, and a better health span. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandeep. It was good talking to you. Thanks for your patience and your great questions.